Good day and good evening, and welcome to Walk and Talk with me, Caetsu Chaiji, but you can just call me Kai. Tonight, as usual, we have a little talk while we walk from where we are to a new place that I've decided beforehand, which we will do with a speedrun timer because it's funny. This would also mean that we've done these basically every other week or so for a full year. Something like that. Since the first walk technically was April 1st last year. Can't do that twice. It wouldn't be nearly as funny the second time, would it? But that is the plan, and last time we left off here at the Kogane bathhouse. And technically I think we left off up there, because there's a little jumping puzzle that way up. But with that said, hey Agony, hey Ilana, hey Tinali, hey Mizunashi, hey Ceres, hey Rust, hey Agent Monica, hey Ilya, hey Zaf, and hey Yannick. Hope you're all doing very well. And hey Ark, hope you're doing well as well. Well, we might as well just get to it. Oh yeah. Also, I had a little dance troupe, as you could see there. So a funny little story to get us started is that pretty much since I got this PC pretty early on, I noticed there was some weird sound coming from one of the fans sometimes when like the PC was really getting up there in pace. And at first I was like, is that normal? Like, is it supposed to be like that? Is it so beefy that one of the fans starts like almost growling and almost starts to vibrate the table a little bit? And I thought that, I don't know about that. And before I really got to figure out whether that was a problem or not, the PC died. So, problem solved, I guess. And then when I got it back, I mean, that problem didn't go away. Came back a little bit after. But it took a while because it turned out that, like, it died leading up to summer. And then, like, the problem came back because it was summer and warm. And then it died again. And then when I got it back, it was, you know, like, leading into winter. So it happened less frequently. And then as it was almost starting to get warmer again, it died again. So, and now we have it again. And it almost immediately started with the weird growling sound. And it's doing it right now, actually. But I don't think you can hear it, which is why I'm more like, that's weird, rather than, that needs to be solved now. Because the manufacturer basically said, well, we didn't hear it while we were testing it. We were aware it was there, you mentioned it, but we didn't hear it. But if you do figure out which fan it is, just let us know and we'll just send you a replacement. Assuming it's not one of the fans on the GPU. I'm pretty sure it's not, but I don't know. And the funny part of the story is the PC is right there. So basically right behind the camera. Although, you know, behind the camera is above the PC technically. But there's a wall behind that, and the PC is facing the, you know, the part you would usually open to check these things into the wall. So when they said, if you can figure out which fan it is, I'm like, yeah, so I need to set up the PC somewhere where I can actually access the inside of the PC. But it also needs to be set up in a position where it can get pushed hard enough that that fan starts growling. Which, well, let's just say that sometimes it says nothing while I'm sitting in Limsa Lomensa on this setup while watching a YouTube video and, like, writing away on Discord. Other times, it's like, oh, you went to Limsa, here we go. So, like, I would probably need to, like, move things around just to have a testing facility to test it. And it would be really sad if it turned out it was a GPU fan. But it's not a big deal, mainly because you can't hear it. Then I'll take the mild annoyance and mild concern The funny part is that it's the loudest and most annoying when it's like at a point where like the fan is starting to get up and going. Now it's like speeding, so it's just like a little bear, like. Whereas when it's starting, it almost makes this almost like strange slicing noise that is a lot more concerning. And the reason how I figured out that it's probably not meant to do that is because when it isn't going full speed, it sometimes stops making the noise if I smack the table. You know, just shake the table, it'll like get out of sync with whatever's making it make that noise, and it stops. And if it was meant to make that noise, it would probably continue to make that noise. Now, with that story out of the way, hey Nox and Alejandro and Gersel and Aradel and Liv, hope you're all doing very well. And Melissa, hope you're doing well as well. But yeah, the check-in on the PC troubles. Hey Milo, hope you're doing well as well. Oh look, Aradel is there. And Milo's there. We need to get to Foundation and then to Western Highlands. The elf place had an elf, yeah, indeed. That's not the worst thing for your house to smell like, Melissa. Hey Rob Gero, hope you're doing well. Asks, how was the new Extreme? We haven't beaten it yet, but we have some plans to see if we can go in and get it done off stream before Savage. I think it's an interesting fight. I don't know if I don't know if it's above average or what it is. I think it's a good fight. The thing that makes it really tough, mainly, is that there are certain sections where it's a little hard to see what you need to see. Like, that's the real problem. Aside from that, it's just a matter of get good. Right? The classic just get good. Access. Oh. Also, what G-pose, Nox? Did you G-pose next to me and then posted it when I didn't have time to check it? I guess I'll have to see it after stream. And I'm doing well, Alejandro. Access, my PC was doing that for a while. I punched the side of my case until it went away, and it seems to be gone permanently now. Are you sure you didn't get it to go away because the fan broke? Like, it just stopped working? Is that a possible possible result? The funny thing is, my previous PC, the reason why the backup PC is named Chainsaw is because it also had a broken fan. But unlike this weird humming, like this weird noise, that one sounded a little bit like a chainsaw. And you could absolutely hear it through the mic. So that needed to be solved, and it has been solved. So now it's just a history check that it is called Chainsaw. Access for me, it was happening a complete random. It would kick in the middle of the night as I was drifting off to sleep. That's also what the thing happened with Chainsaw, is that it would come in pretty much randomly. Weirdly, for the most part, it was less likely to happen when the PC was like going fast. Like, for instance, Final Fantasy XIV was running, it was less likely to do it until it started doing it there as well. Like, let's just say I had done streams where the PC was liable to do it at any moment, and somehow it didn't do it for an entire stream, and then like 5 minutes after I closed stream, the fan started going like, somehow the PC just knew, I have to choose my spots, I have to wait, he's working right now. Also, hey Clove, hope you're doing well. And Twan and Rocky, hope you're doing well as well. It's been a while, hasn't it, Twan? Clove says, how on earth do people savage raid for literally 16 hours straight? Probably practice. Do we need to talk with this guy? Nope. We just walk. Hey, you know me? Hope you're doing well. I know, right, Rocky? What a polite broken fan. Went from Kugane to Ishgard fast then? Yeah, so the path was go down to the harbor in Kugane, go to Limsa, then run across over to the airship landing, and then go to Ishgard from there. The alternative would have been to, you know, walk all the way, but given that we made, like a long time ago, we randomly decided that the rule is that we can use things like ships, it would have been like, why are we walking? Although maybe one day we'll do it as a full walk. Nox is not hair or something stuck in the blades. For the chainsaw, no. The thing is, I cleaned it multiple times, hoping that that would fix it, and it didn't. And in this case, again, given the amount of time, like the funny thing is that every time it has been to the manufacturer, they haven't noticed it. Like, they straight up haven't noticed it. So somehow, like, the thing is, it just doesn't get heated in the correct way for the fan to, like, start winding up like that. So they haven't noticed. Like, I specifically asked when they returned my PC this time, I was like, I also mentioned this staying with a fan. Didn't you hear it, or maybe it went away or something? And they said, we didn't hear it. But, if you figure out which fan it is, let us know. We'll send you a replacement, as long as it's not in that GPU. I'll just send you a replacement GPU. That would be funny. That could be Yak. If it's already dead. Oh, that's also true. Zav did those events with a ton of rating as well. Also enjoy, Nox. Just take the land bridge from Othar to Zaktaral. It sounds like a long bridge. You know, there's something funny here is that every time I've planned somewhere where we go from Ishgard to Idleshire or vice versa, I always look at this path. But the thing is, you can't walk up there. That's not possible. Every path up is like, it looks like you can, and then right at the peak, there's like just like a couple inches higher than you can jump of a ledge, so you can't get up. And over on this side, it's straight up just like a mountain. Just you can't get up there without flying. Pretty funny, which is the reason why we go on different route. There's a landmark called the Watcher here. Wait, is there? Oh, there it is. Oh, yeah. Well, Flo, remember to take breaks. Who knows, maybe it'll be an advantage. Like, if you know what to do and everyone else don't seem to know what to do, it might be an advantage for you to just take a break and wait for people to learn it, and then you can tag back in. Well, that's unlucky, or lucky, I guess, Agony. Agony says, so to your story, the manufacturer couldn't reproduce the sound, so they said there was nothing to be done until they can confirm it. Well, it was that the way I said it was I told them, I basically listed the failure conditions of the PC, the things that were breaking, and then listed it's probably the CPU, because last time these kind of things happened, it was the CPU. And then, like, after that, I was like, by the way, there's also one of the fans seem to make this, like, almost like vibrating noise that can vibrate the table, and it can. But I'm not sure which fan it is. In retrospect, I could have tested that, but I didn't. So I sent it in, and then they fixed the CPU, and then returned. And by fixed, I mean they replaced it. Because the one I had was labeled defect. And then I asked about the fan, and they were like, well, we didn't hear it, so we don't know which fan it is. But if you figure out which fan it is, we'll send you one. So like they didn't say that it wasn't the case, but they didn't find it in their testing. It's possible their workspace is kind of cool, so it just doesn't get up to that point, or it just didn't get pushed in a way that would lead to it making that noise. Because as I said, even when it does happen for me, it seems like the thing that makes it start, there's very specific conditions, or you need to really push it. For instance, I can hear it right now, right? But all they wanted to know was, is the CPU broken? So they did exactly what it would take to test that. So all I need to do is figure out which fan it is, let them know that it's broken, then they'll probably send me one. But it's a little awkward, because I don't know if I can push the PC hard enough to make the fan go brrr without moving the majority of this setup to a different table, which I would rather not. And yeah, that's also true, Clove. That's kind of the problem sometimes. And that's also like, sometimes in our prog, we can run into a problem where it's obvious who's making the mistake. It's obvious what mistake they're making. But the problem is, they know. It's just, they are not, like, they need more practice with it. And we're in a static. So, we just, like, the best we can do is just go, you know what the problem is, right? Yeah, I know what the problem is. Okay, and then we pull again. And wasting time discussing it doesn't help, because what they need is for us to pull again. Can I? Nope. Well. And the thing is, you will have those situations in Party Find as well. The guy that they know what to do, but knowing what to do doesn't mean they can execute on it. Like, let me put it like this, and I've used this example before. When I make my job guides, for some jobs, that clip near the end of the guide, where I basically have like a three minute or so uninterrupted string of opener, rotation, 2-minute burst, and such, like just demonstrated. Sometimes that's take 10, and I know what to do. I know, like I'm doing what I wrote down. Like, like I should know what to do, but I still goofed up. The worst offenders are jobs like machinist, because they have weird stuff like, oh yeah, 110 seconds in, you have to do exactly this, or the 2-minute burst is goofed up. And I'm like, well, I want to demonstrate the 2-minute burst, so I do the opener perfectly, I do the rotation perfectly, and then I make a mistake at 110 seconds. Out the window, try again. From the top. It's the same idea, it's just that now it's a boss fight, so you need 7 other people to even try. Even though, like, if you could just go in and try that on your own, that would be perfect. Jose, Jack, hope you're doing well. Good thing you're here. Because I believe I have 5 clips, and 4 of them are yours. It's the revenge of Yek, who was skipped over walk and talk stream after walk and talk stream. How many tries did each job take? Like each job guide? See, Iraqi says his point is it would be just want an update that just makes unwalkable surfaces walkable, like the top of that cave by Horizon. Oh yeah. Well, the reason why many of those places are not walkable is, of course, because like they implemented flight in AR zones. Like that was already a bonus that we didn't expect. Agent Monica says, without spoiling anything, upon watching videos of M5S, I kind of understand what's going on like other Savage Raves. I would also say, without getting too much into the details, I thought that the thing that would be really, really hard was going to be the mechanic called Arcady Night Fever. And I'm just referring to the mechanic because some people might want to do it blind, and by me referring to a mechanic by its name, it doesn't say anything. So that shouldn't spoil you. But the thing that I think is actually the hard mechanic is the moonwalking frogs. That's the one that makes me like, ugh, because I screw that up on normal. Did you see the playlist someone made of every song reference in that fight? No, but I do recognize many of them myself. Cesar says, back in early noughts, I had a noisy fan and I tried to figure out which one it was, so I stuck my finger into the GPU fan, but I missed the center point, so I broke off a blade. Then the noise never stopped again. Well, I mean, the good news is if you did it on the correct fan, you know that you found the faulty one, right? Yannick says, Machinist needs another battery spender. You know, that would actually be interesting if they had something. But I can already picture that if they got another battery spender, it would be like Reprise for Red Mage, where you're like, thanks? Let's go this way around. Guy the SSS dummy trying to practice for rotation. Guess you'll die then. Yeah. Hey, Creotis. Hope you're doing well. I'll get to that in a moment, Nox. Yeah, Funky Floor Savage. Oh yeah, I could imagine that. Clove says, one of the attacks plays the first 2 notes of Never Gonna Give You Up. That's amazing. That is funny. Hey, Mitty and Patrick. Hope you're doing well. He says, apparently there's a trick to the frogs based on which way they turn. Yeah, that's correct. There is a trick to it. The problem is that I'm not kidding, on normal, I look at the frogs, look at them, process what they're doing, think I know where to go, and then 1 second later my brain is like, well, I can't remember that. And then I forget where to go, which is, we basically discussed it in the static and came to the conclusion, that, well, I mean, the way we resolve it means that the individual is not alone about figuring out where to go. So those that are confused can probably follow someone, just like we do on EX4. Patrick says, question, I'm in 1,000 hours on free trial. Just begun Stormblood, the game is on 30% discount on PSN. Should I get it now or wait for the next expansion for 60% price cut? Ooh, I don't know why that would be a 60% price cut. We're also reasonably early in the current expansion, by the way. So waiting for the next expansion might mean that you will have to wait like a year and a half at the very least, Patrick. But it's up to you. Yeah, you might wait. You might have to wait 2 years. Crowder says, I wanted to report back. I submitted the ticket for my Uber weapon that I accidentally traded in for seals, and they denied it. Just a heads up for folks in the same situation. Yeah, that's the thing, as I said, is that some people have gotten, like, more than once. But it seems like it's a case of they promise you one. And then if you're lucky that the person at the desk that day is nice, they might do it anyway. The way it works, Patrick, is that... So the expansion releases, and about every 4 months, like give or take a week or two, a new major patch releases. And each expansion has 5 major patches. And then a few months after the last major patch, they will like have a final like minor patch. Like usually expansions end on like X.56 or something like that. But that still means that one expansion would take, you know, like 24, 26 months possibly. And then you add however long it takes before the next expansion comes. I think we were in the final patch of Endwalker for like a year? So it was quite long. It probably wasn't a year, just felt like it because it was so long. So the important part is it's on sale. Will you make use of the things you unlock in the game by purchasing it now? Because remember, once you purchase, you have a monthly subscription. Or no game. So that's something to consider. There might be another sale. So you could wait for the next sale, for instance. If you're asking me, Clove, we haven't beaten EX4 yet, but we are going to try off stream before Savage. I say, Marcus, hope you're doing well, and Lucifer. Murder follows the pink lizard's walk. Yeah, something like that. Just random mobs just getting smacked. Right. Did you not do EX4 proc the other day? We did it on stream, Clove. Hello? We did it on stream last week. We haven't revisited since. Does Squeenix ever have sales on game time? Nope. Also, hey Rumble, hope you're doing well. Why the river looks shorter? We're going this way. Nate Aldemar and Originator, hope you're doing well. And hope you're doing well. Yeah, thank you, Originator. I hope you're doing well as well. And welcome. Right, so to Nox's question was something to the effect of how many tries did it take for each job, like for their open and rotation at the end of each guide. For, I believe, both Warrior and Paladin, it took 1 take. For Dark Knight, I think, like, the thing is, it's all from memory, so it's like a guesstimate. I didn't save all the clips. I usually just delete it if I get it wrong. So I don't keep track of that, but I do know consistently that both all the Endwalker Machinist guides and the Dawntrail one took many tries to get the Machinist one right. For Dark Knight, I think it took like 3 or 4 tries, but that was mainly because I goofed up the opener. For Gunbreaker, I think it took a few tries, like 3 or 4, mainly because I goofed it up in some way or another in the 2-minute burst, because I don't believe my GCD was a clean 2.5. So it required a little bit of thinking. I think I got the monk opener right in the third try, something like that, second or third try. And the reason why was because right at the start of the opener, you have this situation where you have to weave very specific things, and my intuition tells me to weave one thing, but the optimal opener set to weave something else. So I would weave that and then go, wait a minute, that's not right, and then go back, which means that it was not too bad. Like, the ones where I goofed up 2 minutes in are a lot worse than the ones where I goofed up 10 seconds in, because I'll just be like, 1, 2, 3, nope, and then just walk out and reset. Just immediately, just nope. For Dragoon, I think I actually got that one in like second try, despite the craziness of the rotation. It is possible I got it on the... Oh no, I think that took a few tries, like 3 or 4 maybe, specifically because my GCD was weird. So I had to like figure out what I do about that. Because on the 1 minute and 2 minute things get wacky. Also sleep well, Clove. The ninja rotation... That is also one that usually takes a few tries, just because, like, I know what to do, and for the most part, the order is not super crucial once you start it. But I have a tendency to get something messed up with the order, and when you're demonstrating, the order is actually important. Hey, Weaver! Nope, you're doing well. Samurai, I think I got it in like the second try, but the thing is, I also specifically chose to do the fast rotation, which is considered easier, so that probably makes a difference. I believe I got Reaper first try, and I definitely got Viper first try. For healers, there isn't really much. I think Astrologian, I might have messed up the demonstration once. For Dancer, I got it first try. And both Machinist and Bard usually take several tries, but Machinist is usually the one that takes like the prime amount, the most amount of time of all jobs, because it's so hard. It's so weird to do it optimally. And then among the mages, weirdly, usually I find Black Mage reasonably easy to demonstrate. Especially now. Like, the footage you probably... that if you've seen my recent Black Mage guide, you may notice that the rotation, like the level 100 demonstration in the opening of the video, is in Stone Sky Sea, whereas the actual footage that I use for the demonstration later is at my house. Because at the time of me recording those, the hardest... duty I had access to for Stone Sky Sea, like the chunkiest striking dummy, was M4S, which didn't survive more than 2 minutes and 30 seconds or so. So I got interrupted in the middle of the end. So I just went to my house and did like 5 minutes just for the fun of it, and that was also the only footage I had of things like the. Well, I call it the UI1 B3 Swiftcast, and then also the only cases where I actually demonstrated the new AF1 Fire Paradox F3P, which are both in the video. So I just used that. But if it was really hard to do the Black Mage rotation, and I wasn't like going to main it or something, I probably would have just been like, well, that'll have to do. That's good enough. I'll just have to work with it. Like, that's what I sometimes do with Machinist. Like, when I get it close enough, I'll just be like, well, I can't do it again. Like, it'll take another hour before I get this right. Sometimes that'll happen. And for Pictomancer, I'm pretty sure I got that one first try as well. And Red Mage, I think, took a few tries, again, because my intuition clashes with what's actually optimal. Which also gives me problems whenever I play the job, is that I do the thing that I feel makes sense, and then in the middle of it, I'll be like, that's not right. Which makes it really confusing for me. Asks us, how are you at the Blue Mage opener? Yeah, the problem with that one is that it's super specific. Like, it's super specific. And if you mess it up at all, you just don't get to finish it. So it's really hard, but I have done it. It's just been a while since I bothered. Like, I made Blue Mage guides in Endwalker. Hey D-Dragon and Leah, hope you're doing well. D-Dragon says, any tips for someone trying to level a second job? I have a leveling guide. My general advice is, if you're starting on one, thank you, Eridel. If you're starting on one, if you start at level 1, you have this. Start with this. Just start with this. And if you somehow run out of things, just do a fate or something. You can also do a live quest or something, but this should be fine. This is found under logs and it's called hunting log. Once you hit level 16, you can queue for leveling roulette. And once you've done that, you can just queue for like the available dungeons. That is correct, Marcus. Most XP bonuses are, whether they say so or not, they have and if they say it, it's explicit. If they don't say it, they have an implied XP bonus from defeating enemies. And you just have to know that. And the particularly funny one is the Bojan earring, because that one is from defeating enemies, which means that it doesn't work on the fates in, well, in anything that gives XP in Boja, really. But they don't tell you that. But yeah, once you hit level 16, you can spam dungeons, but still continue to do this if you have this. For jobs that start at level 30 plus, I mean, you can just start with leveling roulette and just spam dungeons, but you might want to like do some fates while you wait if it's a DPS or something. And when you hit level 50, there's more options, there are more roulettes and whatnot, but I cover that in the guide itself. The awkward part is usually from level 1 to 50, because you have way less options. However, every time you do a dungeon, you get like 3 levels. So it's not too bad. And if you're thinking tips for trying to level a second job while you haven't finished the MSQ or something, then like, you are probably ahead of the MSQ in level. So you're probably safe to just like, if you can get the other job up to the level of the MSQ, you can probably split the XP between 2 jobs, no problem. It's easy. It says, practicing machinist rotation has been the only time I've been aware of how long I've been hitting the dummy for because of summoning Queen at different battery values. Yeah, exactly. I think there's something about just at the 1 minute, specifically 1 minute into a fight, you have to summon the Queen at a very specific time, optimally or something like that. It's mildly comparable to how Black Mage works now. Because Black Mage's optimal, like, filler rotation, you could say, like, Black Mage is mostly filler, you could almost say, is that because of the existence of the Fire Paradox Fire 3 sequence, you open with, like, 12 Fire 4s and 2 Flare Stars, which means you don't have a Fire Starter, right? Which means that every Astral Fire state, you basically do Ice Paradox, Transpose, Fire Paradox, Fire 3. But the moment you get your next mana font, which is, you know, like 100 seconds into the fight, or approximately 2 minutes in, you will have a Fire Starter to spare there, because that means you go into an Astral Fire state where you will produce both the Fire Starter you needed to start it, plus 1. And that one you bring out of the Astral Fire state, and now you can do the AF1 F3P, like the old school one. And if you can hold on to that Fire Starter, then, for instance, you know, 3.5 minutes into a fight when your next mana font comes up, there are various, like, extenders that you can use if mana font is coming up shortly. And, like, you need, like, 10 seconds, but a lot of them require that you have Fire Starter, which means you can't really do it as well on the 2 minute, but you can on the closer to 4 minute, and the 6 and the 8 and the 10 minute. So Black Mage's rotation changes throughout if you're optimizing. The difference there is, of course, that Black Mage now is flexible enough that you can also just go, well, I need to do it like this right now. And then you just adjust on the fly based on what you need. Just a moment. Let's see, Elias is the first additional one is always the hardest. Yeah, for leveling jobs, that is true. But partly also because you don't know what to do, right? I did not understand Samurai Red Mage until I watched the guide and read through a few more. Yeah. It is funny because both Samurai and Red Mage are reasonably complicated, so it's not that clear what to do if you want to play optimally. Both of them you can kind of wing it. But with Samurai, you will notice that, well, it's kind of awkward to reapply Higanbana. And with Red Mage, you might notice that, well, I feel like there are cooldowns that you're not using smartly and things like that. Remember to kidnap a mentor? How much is the bonus for having a mentor? How much is the bonus for having a mentor in your group, actually? I never got to use it, so I don't know. 20 or 25%? Is that also from defeating enemies? So speaking of leveling, me and Uri on alts got our jobs to 16s, then did the first 3 dungeons, we got to level 26. Ha! Exactly. Exactly. Hey, Dinky the Elf! Hope you're doing... Hobie Dinky the Elf, hope you're doing well. Axis, it's sad that all this optimization on Machinist doesn't really get you anything. I mean, it does get you things, it's just that people are too focused on the fact that it isn't as powerful as other jobs. The thing is, as I've said before, I know, Nox, it's, of course, Uri is Ridleyan. The thing is, with Machinist, as we've talked about before, by its design, it doesn't scale nearly as well with raid buffs as other jobs, which often makes it look very bad in the scenarios where you would compare, because it just doesn't scale that well. But as far as I know, as far as I understand, Machinist is pretty good out of the box. Now, whenever we are interested in looking at what's best, that is of course never good enough. It of course also doesn't help that Machinist is really hard to play optimally. Twan says, I'm leveling Black Mage right now, and every other level the job changes dramatically. Every other level is maybe an exaggeration, but yeah, I know what you mean. It's even crazier, because due to the simplifications in the job, there is, like, the earliest level that you can do a transpose line, quote-unquote, as, like, they're often called, you know, non-standard Black Mage, is level 35. You can start doing shenanigans with Black Mage at level 35. You might sit there and go, how? The way you do it is, you have your Astral Fire stage. You're just spamming Fire 1 because you don't have Fire Starter. And then you cast your last Fire 1, and then you go, oh, I need to reapply Thunder. That's convenient. I have a Thunder head. Then you go Thunder, Transpose, Swift Cast, Blizzard 3, and boom, you gained 87 potency. You hit level 42, technically you can do AF1, F3P, there's just a particular little twist there, and I checked, I calculated it. It's better to actually use AF3, F3P, as in use your fire starters before exiting Astral Fire, it appears. But that's partly explained by the fact that Fire 3 is actually like Fire 3 in Astral Fire 3 is your strongest single target spell in that level range. So it makes sense that you wouldn't want to sacrifice that. And the potency difference between doing AF1 F3P or not is like less than 1%. I would almost wager that it's less than 0.1%. But I don't think that's quite it. I think it's closer to 1%. Maybe it's like 0.3. Jose, Cody, and Matthew, hope you're doing well. But this is my first job ever was Black Mage. I got it the whole way to level 90 and got to Shadowbringers before even unlocking another job. Probably like playing a different job entirely now. Compared to Endwalker, I would say Black Mage is still closer in similarity to some other jobs that got reworked, despite what some people might say. But yeah, relatively, it's a pretty big jump. But that one is difficult, Ark, because the problem with Machinist is, like, multifold. One part is that it appears that Machinist doesn't scale as well with optimization as other jobs do. Another part is that because we know that, as in, we, the player base, know that Machinist doesn't perform as well as certain other jobs in optimization, the players that care about optimizing enough are much less likely to play Machinist in the first place. Why would you play Machinist when it's not the best, right? Which means that the players that are going to play Machinist are players that play Machinist for Machinist. Mostly. That doesn't mean that they're bad at it. In fact, Machinist is incredibly, like, researched. People are trying their best to pump as much damage out of it as they possibly can. But it really takes the effort, right? But that still means that when you have a Machinist in your group, the probability that they're playing Machinist because they like Machinist versus they're playing Machinist because they like Machinist and also they're good at it is, you know, it's there. It's possible that the Machinist you got just isn't that good. Matthew says, will Highfire 2 be good before 8.0 though? I am actually in an interesting... I have thought about that, in that... What would it take to make Highfire 2 good? What would be an acceptable state for Highfire 2? I imagine whatever it would take... Like, if we want to look at High Blizzard 2 and Highfire 2 as being fine, quote-unquote... They would need to have enough potency that it is worth it to cast High Blizzard 2 to enter Umbral Ice, followed by Freeze. And then, by extension, that it is worth it to enter Astral Fire by casting Highfire 2, and then casting, you know, 2 Highfire 2s with the Umbral Hearts before you cast Flare, Flare, Flare Star. But... you might be able to find a potency amount where this is the case before you get Flare Star. But when you get Flare Star, you would need to buff Highfire 2 accordingly to make it stay worth doing. Because Flare Star is so strong that even if they nerfed Flare, it would probably still be worth it. I mean, one way they could do it, Matthew, is if they made it so that Flare and Freeze requires Stage 3 in their respective elements, so you need Umbral Ice 3 or Astral Fire 3, then they could force you to do it. But I don't think that's the plan. Like, I don't think that's what they want. It's hard to say, and it's also like, just if we take a moment to think about this, in the AoE, optimal AoE rotation of Black Mage, you transpose between ice and fire. You don't cast a cold fire spell or a hot ice spell. Optimally, you don't at level 100. But that's also the case on single target. So technically, they've basically made it so that Black Mage optimally never casts a hot ice spell or a cold fire spell if they can get away with it. Which means that anything they could do that would make High Blizzard 2 or High Fire 2 good would at least break that symmetry, whether it's an acknowledged symmetry by the developers or not. And yeah, I could imagine if you haven't played Black Mage in a while, Dinky, you might benefit from the guide. Alejandro says, when playing Red Mage, does anyone feel like you die easier than Summoner or Black Mage? I don't know why that... I think the only reason that could be is because Summoner and Black Mage both have a barrier and Red Mage doesn't. Hey William, hope you're doing well. See, I don't know why, but Scholar to me seems a pretty slow job. I don't know, but all the animations seem so clunky. Am I wrong? Or the animations of Scholar are kinda on the slow side? I mean, it's supposed to be like a tactician. You know, just like being smart with its moves. So I think it kinda makes sense that it isn't like speedy. But I don't like if you mean like the animations feel slow, that's one thing. The job itself is probably not that different from the other healers in pace aside from that. But you do, like, the thing is, Alejandro, you shouldn't take more damage, but it's probably barriers. Like, Summoner gets a barrier every minute, and they can have 2 of them. Black Mage gets one every 2 minutes. Pictomancer gets one every so often. Red Mage doesn't have a barrier. Like, straight up, it doesn't have one. Magic Barrier isn't even a barrier. It's a damage reduction. Elias says, I just want enhanced flare back. That would also be a way to make like Fire 2 worth using. Good luck, Taldabar. But the way that would work out is, of course, that you would cast High Fire 2 from Ice, probably. So you go Astral Fire 3, and then one more to get enhanced flare, because that's how it worked. And then you'd cast Flare, Flare, Flare Star. What, like, that wouldn't solve High Blizzard, of course. Well, it would help High Blizzard, I guess, because you would need the MP to cast Fire 2 in Fire to get enhanced flare. They could also make it so that, like, they might not even need to add that much potency to enhanced flare. I think you mean UI 3, right, Leah? But basically, you would need more than 2.5k MP. So you can't, like, you need to use Umbral, you need to use Blizzard to, like, recover enough MP to cast a Fire 2 in Astral Fire. And then that's resolved. But an interesting thing is also consider that they could make it so that, like, enhanced flare doesn't boost potency as much, but they could make it so that enhanced flare is what makes the cast time 2 seconds, instead of it just being 2 seconds like it is now. Although that would, of course, change some other things. As it stands right now, Flare, Flare, Flare Star is technically a way to round off a fight. Because Flare, Flare, Flare Star is better than Fire 4, Despair. But that would still be, like, that is still something to weigh, like, whether it's worth it or not. Gibbs says, when using the transpose AoE rotation for 70 to 100, what's the opening spell? I imagine what you mean is, like, if you're in no state, the way I usually start in a dungeon is, if I have super ethers, which I don't, I ran out the other day. If I have super ethers, I'll just swift cast high fire 2, just or fire 2, just at level 100, by the way. That's where that matters. Just fire 2 something, and then like thunder on the initial mobs as the tank is pulling, and then I'll triple cast. And basically, because I have nothing better to do, I'll just start AoEing. So with the triple cast, I'll go Flare, Super Ether, Flare, Flare Star. And then I can Mana Font, for instance. And then just keep going. If I don't have Super Ethers, I would probably start with... honestly, I think I would just start with Blizzard 2 on a Swift cast into Freeze. While I can still stand still, and then follow along and do like a Thunder. And then maybe triple cast. Or better, if I can stop for a second, cast High Fire 2. Because I am an Umbral Ice 3, and it's fast. So, and the mobs are not rounded up yet. So the loss of potency by casting a Cold Fire 2 is heavily mitigated by the fact that not all the mobs are there yet. So I'll just do that, and then I can do an Astral Fire 3 flare twice. And then go from there. If I'm not at the level where Flare Star is available, then I might just open with Fire 2 Flare. Or Fire 2 Thunder Flare or something. It's not that important. The thing that you should keep in mind when opening from no state on AoE, Gibbs, is if you start fast enough, like if you get it going quickly enough, then it doesn't matter if you use some of the garbage spells like a Hot Blizzard 2 or a Cold Fire 2, as long as it makes your actual AoE better once the pack is fully grouped up. Other things you can also do, as I think Leah mentioned, is if you have Paradox, like if you have a Paradox marker from somewhere, you can use that while the mobs are still being rounded up as an attack while you run. You can also do other stuff like if you have that Paradox, you could use Ice Paradox, and then you could transpose if you have Firestarter, for instance, or even if you don't, if you have Firestarter, you can transpose Fire 3 and then Fire Paradox, and then you could technically transpose into Ice Paradox again, and then you have to start to get creative, because you're not getting another Paradox marker without casting Blizzard 3 now. But you know, the key is doing something. Doing something while you round up the mobs. But the key is also, like, if you're starting from no state, then just cast something. Like Fire 2 or Blizzard 2 is probably fine. If there's only one mob in range, you could also go Fire 3 or Blizzard 3. Just keep in mind that they take slightly longer to cast than that. So, again, Swift cast might be a good idea to start. That is admittedly something that I kinda step over in the guide. I don't really talk that much about how to start. But really, it doesn't matter. Just cast something and get started. And yeah, I would say, in regards to Fire 2 and Blizzard 2, I would say that it is already a success if they make Fire 2 and Blizzard 2, and of course the high versions, a bit stronger. Just a bit stronger. I think I want to go over there. They need to be strong enough that They need to be strong enough that I don't make a guide and go, I mean, you could use these spells, but they suck so much that I'm going to give this non-standard alternative as the default. And yeah, exactly, Leah, that's also something you could do. The reason why I suggested just Swift cast HB2 and then freeze is because it's pretty normal that I thought you could actually get inside the building. I did see the map, but never mind. It's because sometimes like you have enough time that you can cast freeze and then thunder and then just like manip to the tank or something like that. Like, be creative. That's really the important part, is be creative with your rotation. Like, there are a lot of ways to do it. The key is that Blizzard 2, Blizzard 3, Fire 2, and Fire 3, like, they're all the ones you would want to start with, but they take a while to cast. So if you actually just go and cast them, you might fall behind. Make ley lines enhance the power of only B2 and F2 for my amusement. That is an interesting solution. A funny thing that I heard just earlier today actually was the suggestion that ley lines is actually kind of pointless, quote unquote, on AoE. Because you will outpace transpose. On lower levels, that arguably isn't entirely false. Especially not if you have spell speed. But once you hit level 100, it's not too big of a deal. It can get problematic if you have a high spell speed build and also use ley lines. I speak from experience. Turns out that even if I transpose as quickly as I can and I have a blank after Flare Star, I still will finish freeze and a thing, and then like I will clip on the transpose. Because my GCD goes below 2 seconds. But yeah, exactly, Leah. If your GCD is short enough that that if you early weave transpose on the after the fire section, you can't properly late weave the transpose after the ice section. Then you like ley lines isn't going to help you that much. It will help you, but it's going to feel weaker. At that point, use HF2 and HB2. Yeah, that's also an option. Hey, Gleaming. Oh, you're doing well. But yeah, it gets really complicated in general. Just in general, it gets really complicated. But just something that is worth mentioning about all that is specifically that there's more to it than transpose has a 5-second cooldown. Because if you early weave transpose out of one state, so specifically the fire state, because that's the longer one technically, then on 0 spell speed, just as an example, you would have already ran like about 1.8 or 1.9 seconds of the cooldown before you cast freeze. Then you cast freeze, now like 4.3 seconds have passed, and then you cast something else, and now the cooldown has definitely passed. And you could late weave it, so like the next spell you will like be able to wait 1.8 seconds, so it adds up for a combined like about 6.2 seconds or something like that. But then you have spell speed, and then it can quickly become like 5.1 seconds, especially with ley lines helping. Patrick says, since Black Mage changed, I think Fire 1 should just change to Fire 4 as soon as you get Fire 2. It would probably make sense, because practically speaking, Fire 4 and Blizzard 4 entirely replace Blizzard 1 and Fire 1 in your rotation. But there are a few, like, super duper niche situations where it might be a problem with the current design. If Blizzard 1 and Fire 1 just upgraded into Blizzard 4 and Fire 4, and then like you just get Paradox as a new button, then you wouldn't be able to use quote-unquote Blizzard 1 or Fire 1 from no state, which you can now. They could change that. They could make it so that you can cast Blizzard 1 and Blizzard 4 and Fire 4 from no state, and like Blizzard 4 just doesn't give you any Umbral Hearts if you're not in Umbral Ice. Like they could do that. Just to like make it so that you don't use it in Astral Fire and things like that. Similarly, and this is possibly this is me going, let me just reach into the bag of tricks to find a reason to cast Fire 1 once you have Fire 4. Like, I'm grabbing into the bag of tricks looking for an excuse. I'm not saying it's a good one, I'm saying it's technically applicable as an excuse. The excuse is, what if the boss is going on an intermission or something? Let's say you're in Uvu. And as Black Mage, weird. Who would do that? Am I right? Maybe you would now. And Garuda's going to die. Like you don't need to burst anymore. You can chillax. In fact, it's probably better that if you hold back a bit, you see others stop their attack. You could build a fire starter. That would help you on the next guy. Like, that'll help you with a little bit more damage on Ifrit. But you wouldn't be able to do that if Fire 1 automatically upgraded to Fire 4. Unless Fire 4 received the ability to give you Firestarter procs. But now we're adding like more changes to the job. It's not just like a quality of life thing upgrades to other thing. But I do see it. The thing is, it's not too bad. Like, what would it do? There would be Black Mages that sometimes you run into them. I ran into them. That just won't use Blizzard 4 Fire 4. I don't know why, but they don't. And they would, of course, automatically, quote-unquote, get it right, because Fire 1 and Blizzard 1 would just turn into Blizzard 4 and Fire 4. Just automatically. Just bam. You can't get it wrong at that point. Unless, of course, you just go, nope, I'm gonna spam Blizzard 3 and Fire 3 for no reason. But for the rest of us, like, if it's a big deal, you can just do this. I'm not, like, the thing is, I have considered just swapping them myself, but it's so deeply ingrained in my muscle memory to hold Alt to use Fire 4 that I'm not sure how well it would go down. Agent Monica says, did they change Sophia Extreme? I just did the answering for Chloe and it was different. I don't think they changed it, but what I can say is that Sophia has an HP threshold. When she drops below a certain threshold, she skips to the ad phase. So if, like, depending on how quickly you pass that threshold, it might play out slightly differently. Gaswell says, anyone remember that before Dawntrail released? They showed Black Mage with a Fire 4, Blizzard 4 button replacement. I feel like I remember seeing that, but given that I've not met anyone else that goes, yeah, I remember that too, I guess I'm crazy. But I'm pretty sure that I saw that they made it so that Flare and Freeze shared a button, and Fire 4 and Blizzard 4 shared a button. But I don't remember anyone else seeing it. Like, maybe it was something that I dreamed up or something. I think I also remember the suggestion that Despair and Umbral Soul would share buttons. But again, maybe I'm crazy. Maybe I imagined it when they suggested this change. Somehow that hadn't become a thing. Yeah, the funny thing is, the reason why those changes make sense is because Fire 4 and Blizzard 4, you can't use unless you're in the appropriate state. Despair and Umbral Soul, you can't use unless you're in the correct state. Flare and Freeze, you can't use unless you're in the correct state. So, like, they could just have a, you know, the way that Pictomancer has these things. Like, it'll show a specific button that is unusable if you're not in the correct quote-unquote position to do it. They could just have something like that for Black Mage. Also, hey Cyril, hope you're doing well. And I'm glad to hear that. I was wondering at 100, is it possible to do freeze high fire if no instant casts? I would say it becomes complicated in general if you're out of blanks. I can say that by design, you will always have thunder at that point. If the reason you don't have an instant cast is because you already did it, so like you didn't do freeze first, then if you don't have anything after freeze, just hard transpose to fire. Just thing, freeze, transpose. Like, that's still better than wasting time doing something else. Flare's that good. You want to get to flare. If you go into ice and you're like, well, I very recently applied thunder, or they will not survive the full dot if I reapply thunder, so I don't want to reapply thunder. Like, you go into ice and you have a good reason why you don't want to use thunder. Then, if you're about to go into ice, you could go into ice with high blizzard too. You could do that, and then do freeze, and then like you have a fast high fire too to switch into fire. Like, you could do that, and then just completely skip transpose for that. Another thing you could do is if you realize the problem as you're casting freeze, like you already transposed and now you're casting freeze, I think the best way you can recover it at that point is probably, like, I mean, again, you could have Paradox. So I would say you could use Paradox there, but if there's a lot of mobs, there probably isn't, but like 8 or so maybe 7, 6, 7, 8 mobs, you could still cast High Fire too. And that's still an option. But if there's not that many mobs, you could just Ice Paradox and then like use that as your blank. Like, as I said a little bit earlier, think outside the box. Black Mage is actually a really creative job, so if you can come up with something like, yeah, there are the optimal way to do things, but if you kind of know where you're going on AoE is Flare, 2 of them, figure out how to do that. Just figure out how to do that. There are many ways to do it, and when you find yourself in the moment, the best you can do is do something. Like, if you just pause and go, well, I don't know what to do now, that's the worst thing that could happen, because even casting Thunder 2 for no dot benefit is better than doing nothing. Straight up casting a Cold Fire 4? Actually, even Fire 4, you can't do that, but if you found a way to cast a Cold Fire 4, that would still be better than doing nothing. If you cast a Cold Fire 2, that's still better than doing nothing. In fact, it's actually pretty decent because it will make your flare better. The the 3 ads didn't spawn, but there were different ads that attacked alongside Sophia. Were they clones, Agent Monica? Like, did they look like Sophia? Oh. That is interesting, Leah. But I also remember, I'm pretty sure that it showed that the Hall of the Novice tactical training was, like, highlighted. When you logged in for the first time. Yeah, Agent Monica, those clones are what's normally supposed to happen. And that's what you skip if you don't get her to the threshold fast enough. Yeah, also that, guys. They could also just make Freeze and B4 the default, and Umbral Soul too. Hey Philippe, hope you're doing well. Says, do we spend our fire starters as they come? Also, is there an optimal point to apply Thunder? I feel like I stand not casting way too long after using those. Before you get Fire 4, so from level 42 to 59, you use your fire starters as they come. If you exit fire with a fire starter, like if you use Fire 1 and then like you already clicked Blizzard 3, and then you go, oh wait, I have a fire starter, and then you enter Umbral Ice, then you can salvage it by, you know, you cast your Blizzard 3, then you cast Blizzard 1, and then either that's when you reapply Thunder, if that fits, I'll get to that, or, and then you transpose, or you just, after Blizzard 1, you just hard transpose. I don't know if that's the best way to put it, but when I say hard transpose, that's when you cast a spell where you're not supposed to weave something. Like, if it has a cast time of 2 seconds, then you technically don't have space to weave something. You do it anyway. That's when I say you hard transpose. Like, you hard weave a transpose, and then you cast Fire 3. Because Fire Starter, Fire 3 in Astral Fire 1 is good enough that you want to sacrifice that over casting an Umbral Ice 3 Fire 3. Once you get Fire 4, well, first of all, you will not have Fire Starter procs until you get to Paradox. Like, optimally speaking, you will not have Fire Starter procs because you're not going to cast Fire 1 until you get, like, well, you're not going to cast Fire 1 aside from that really niche example I gave of, like, deliberately producing a Fire Starter proc for something. And when you get Paradox, that's when I talk about this in my Black Mage guide, the AF1 F3P. I should have a picture of it. This is AF1 F3P. Cast Blizzard, like you enter Umbral Ice by casting Blizzard 3. Then you cast Blizzard 4 for the Umbral Hearts, and then you use Paradox. Technically, you could have Xenoglossy or Thunder here, or here, like wherever. Like, they just fit in. But you go Blizzard 3, like the Ice part is Blizzard 3, Blizzard 4, instant Paradox, and then you transpose, and that's when you use your Firestarter proc. Because this is better than like casting a cold Fire 3. So you you carry your Firestarter proc out of Astral Fire so that you can start your next Astral Fire like this with a Firestarter proc, fittingly named, right? And I have another picture. You don't even need Firestarter to do that. You don't even need to do that. This, I call it AF1 Para F3P. Alright, Cody, enjoy your evening, and thank you. But yeah, the difference here is instead of casting Firestarter Fire 3 as you start your Astral Fire, if you don't have a Firestarter proc, If you don't have a Firestarter proc, if you don't have a Firestarter proc, you can still skip the Cold Fire 3. Because you just go Blizzard 3, Blizzard 4, Paradox, which is instant, so you can Weave Transpose. And because you are an Umbral Ice 3 with Umbral Hearts, you get a Paradox marker, so you can just fire Paradox immediately after, which gives you Firestarter, so you can cast Fire 3. And this is okay, because Paradox does unaspected damage, so this Paradox doesn't care whether you're in Astral Fire 1 or 3. It's the same damage. So you just use it to, like, yoink out a Firestarter, and then you use Firestarter. Obviously, having the freedom to use Paradox at a more convenient time, because it is instant, it's nice for mobility, is probably better, but it is a DPS loss to cast a Cold Fire 3 at any point if you had the option to not do that. So for the Thunder thing, that was the other question, I believe. You cast Thunder when the Thunder debuff on your targets, potentially, is below 3 seconds, preferably. When it passes below 3 seconds. Sometimes it's okay to do it when it hits below 6 seconds or 5 seconds, depending on how it matches up. But preferably you reapply it just as it's about to run out. When I say targets is on on 3+ targets, you make sure that you use High Thunder 2 or Thunder 2 or Thunder 4. Make sure it's up on everything. And on 2 targets, it's usually better to maintain Thunder, the single target Thunders, on both targets. So the first time Thunder comes up, you put it on one guy, and then the second time it comes up, you put it on the other guy. But yeah, basically you use Thunder every time it needs to be reapplied. Which does mean that a lot of the time, you will not use Thunder Hit. You'll just skip it. Also, hey Shaq, hope you're doing well. Patrick says, why is it that Fire 1 and Fire 4 have the same MP cost if they don't substitute one another? One way is to be able to finish a Fire phase with a Fire 1, hoping to have a Fire starter to transpose. The reason, Patrick, is because before the change, it's basically because it gives you a certain number of spell casts. That's what it's really about. It didn't have to say 800 and 800. It didn't need to use MP. They could have just said, they could just say when you enter Astral Fire that you get a certain number of spells. It just happens that 800, when it turns into 1600, it perfectly lines up to give the result that they wanted. But the problem is that Fire 1 has a specific purpose that Fire 4 doesn't have. Basically, Fire 1 is in essence a utility spell. It's just that because it's your best spell, in addition to being a utility spell, until you get Fire 4, it is not a utility spell until then. The utility it provides is that it used to be the one you refreshed your Astral Fire timer with. It's not anymore. And it produces Firestarter. It doesn't really matter that they have the same cost. I mean, Scathe also has the same cost, technically. Blizzard 3 has the same... Blizzard 4 has the same cost. It's just that once you enter a state, all ice spells are free. Which actually makes it extremely funny that Blizzard 4 and Freeze have an MP cost at all, isn't it? It's rather peculiar, isn't it? Freeze has a 1000 MP cost, but you can't cast it for its MP cost ever. Because at any point where you have access to Freeze, it's free. I think on YouTube that if you have it in focus, that M is auto mute. Or rather, is the mute hotkey. So that might be it. Um, but yeah, the thing is, as I said, they could have it so that Fire 1 and Blizzard 1 just naturally upgrades into the 4 variants. It's just that by the current design, it would technically remove options. And if they made it so that Fire 4 also was able to give Fire Starter procs, it would completely change how Black Mage plays. At high level. And I don't think necessarily for the better. A lot of people don't actually like the level 50 Firestarter spam rotation. Bits says, I would guess that there was some coding reason it had to have a cost, but there are other free spells. I can explain to you exactly why all the ice spells have costs like this. It's because the effect of Aspect Mastery, that ice spells are free, just flat, straight up that ice spells are free when you are in a state at all, I believe was added in Dawntrail. I'm pretty sure in Endwalker that ice spells were only free if you were in Astral Fire or Umbral Ice 3 specifically. And before Endwalker, the trait that made us that Astral Fire makes ice spells free and Umbral Ice makes fire spells free was level 72. You may notice that you don't get a trait at level 72. You do still get Despair, but they gave you that trait with Despair because Despair would be pretty useless without that trait. But they discovered that this was so good that they gave it to you at level 1 when they released Endwalker. Exactly, Marcus. Level 72. And just to be clear, Shadowbringer's AoE rotations were also kinda cursed. Because you could use Freeze from Astral Fire, and Freeze gave you 1 Umbral Heart. That meant that before you had access to Umbral Heart, so level before 58, you just spammed Freeze. Because before level 50, there was no point in casting Fire because Freeze was fine. So you just spam Freeze, which ironically is kind of where we are now. And you get Flare, but it's not worth using because if you cast Flare, you would have to basically transpose and then wait for an MP tick before you could do anything. Then at level 58, they give you access to Umbral Hearts, which then meant that you could go freeze, flare, freeze, flare, freeze, flare, freeze, flare, but that would be cold flares. Again, you could cast cold flares at one point. I believe the way you did it was freeze into fire 2 into flare, but I can't actually remember. The thing is, you used the Umbral Heart so that you could cast flare without going to 0 MP. But the key being, the reason why Blizzard 4 and Freeze have MP costs is because it used to matter, and I believe they just left it there. Like, I imagine the logic is that they just went, well, that's funny. It doesn't hurt anyone. We'll just leave it there. Like, it just didn't matter. Patrick, what level is your Black Mage? Just quick question. What level is your Black Mage? Yeah, nowadays, the freeze rotation, I call this the strategy that I demonstrated in my guide, I call it the Thunder Freeze. And the way that it works, for those that didn't see it, is... Oh, I actually made a picture of it. It might not line up perfectly because of spell speed and whatnot. But you do this. This is the rotation. And the reason why I ask, Patrick, is because once you get Despair, you will always finish your single target Astral Fire states with Despair. The only way Fire 1 would be able to fit in that is if Fire 1 cost 200 MP, because Astral Fire doubles the cost of fire spells. And if you have 1200 MP to spare, you actually only have 400 MP to spare because you're going to cast Despair. So you don't actually have 1200 MP to spare. And Fire 1 is only a chance to get a fire starter. So it would basically, like, what you're looking at is, what if we could have Paradox at level 60? Which would make Paradox feel kind of meaningless, right? It would just feel like a potency boost instead of actually adding something. People are asking, what's the Gazel asked, what is the transpose for? This is a looping rotation. So that transpose puts you up here. So the way it works is, you start from nothing, you cast Fire 2, now you have Thunderhead. So you cast Thunder, Transpose, and then you cast Freeze, and then you cast Thunder with your extra Thunderhead. And then you cast Freeze until the duration of Thunder is like below 7 seconds. Then you transpose, and the reason why the transpose is over here is because it's technically a late weave. It's technically a late weave because Freeze has a cast time. And you transpose, which gives you Thunderhead. Then you cast an AF1 Fire 2, which is slow. And then Thunder needs to be reapplied. The reason for this is so that you run the time of transpose, so you can transpose again and spam Freeze. Fair enough, Patrick. In that case, let me point out that the woes you have over finishing off an Astral Fire state is solved at level 72. They give you Despair specifically to finish your Astral Fire states. And later at level 90, they give you a new way to get Firestarter. Like, there is no need to reintroduce Fire 1 in the rotation. That is part of the reason why people are like, so when you get Fire 4, Fire 1 is pointless, is because it is. And there's no need to add it, because later unlocks solve the problem. And by trying to solve the problem at level 70 or 60, you're basically, it's like, I would say it's a more extreme version of doing things like, why can't Warrior just have inner release at level 6? Why do we have to do this song and dance where you have to like build up resources to make a good Berserk burst? Like, on the one hand, I agree, that would be nice. On the other hand, the introduction of inner release is so amazing because by virtue of you having to having to deal with that for 64 levels, you really know how to appreciate not having to do that at level 70. On the one hand, isn't it weird that Warrior gets easier as you level up? On the other hand, that's how unlocks work sometimes. Also that, Philippe, it would be nice if the AoE generated resources a bit sooner, but like those kinds of ideas is like, on the one hand it kind of makes sense, on the other hand the solution is there, it just comes a bit later. And Alejandro, I do explain this in the guide, but it's level 40 to 49 for the Thunder Freeze rotation. You hit level 50 and then you do this. Of course, Thunder goes in here somewhere. But now we're back to, well, apply it where it makes sense, instead of applying it at a very specific time. And again, yes, Flare is that good. Flare is so good that the only thing that matters at level 50 is casting the most amount of flares you can, preferably Astral Fire 3, to put it into perspective a bit. Perspective of Thunder Freeze. One Astral Fire 3 flare will do 2.5 freezes worth of damage to secondary targets, as in the primary target takes more than that. So if you compare it to the Thunder Freeze rotation, if you can cast one flare and nothing else every like 6.5 seconds, then you're doing more damage than the freezes that would have been cast in that time. By just casting one flare every that amount of time. Which is the reason why the rotation basically boils down to how quickly can I concoct an Astral Fire 3 flare. That's the only thing I care about. Hey Seraph, hope you're doing well. I feel like you're actively ignoring my point, Patrick. Anyways, Slithergale, hope you're doing well. Is it Slithergale? Minimalistic. Yeah. You know, the saddest part there, Gazel, is that Blizzard 2 isn't even on it. Oh, that's unfortunate, Seraph. Hopefully it gets better. But yeah, on a different note, we have a bunch of clips. One from Yannick, and I think like 4 from Vjek. I see Yannick is here. Is Vjek here? Fair enough, Patrick. Enjoy your evening. And also Copper Salt Fate. Hope you're doing well. But yeah, we actually have Vjek soloing Diamond Weapon Extreme. We have Vjek demonstrating what happens if you somehow survive an enrage on Tsukuyomi normal. We have a clip of Vjek doing something in Uewasa Field Station. We have a clip of Vjek doing the new Extreme. And then we have Yannick doing something in Palace of the Dead. So if Vjek is not here, then we have 1 clip. If Vjek is here, then we have 5 clips. If Vjek was here earlier, I don't know if they had to go. Or if they're in the middle of a duty, so they're like, oh, you're here. Fantastic. In that case, it probably makes sense to mix it up a little bit. Something like a Vjek clip and a Yannick clip, and then like the short clip, and then, you know, so that we don't just do all the Vjek in a row. Yeah, I am actually curious what happens. It's a little bit loud. What happens if you survive Tsukuyomi's hard enrage? Oh, maybe next time's up. When you say a P4S clip, what kind of clip? like a just a clear, or like a solo run, or like you usually do the minimum item level, right? Yeah, exactly, Yannick. What usually happens with these kind of enrages is that if you survive, the game just goes, huh. And then the screen fades to black. Like, the game is like, well, that was not supposed to happen, but usually you're supposed to be dead now. Scene, and then just, sorry, and then just resets. I'm going to guess that that's what happens here. Leah says, alternative, you get another enrage cast. Oh yeah, that's also funny. Wait, who was it? Was it Eaterit? Oh. Yep. I can't remember who it was that maybe that was also Viek that demonstrated what happens if you survive Titan Extreme's hard enrage before the walls go down. Because it was apparently possible. It was possible to survive it no problem, which actually meant that you kind of got hard stuck, and the only way to get out, because Titan isn't actually capable of killing a tank at that point, the only way to get out was to AFK until the game kicked you out. No worries, Patrick. I'm just saying, making Fire 1 upgrade straight to Fire 4 does technically remove an option. It just does technically remove an option. A very niche option, but an option. So I don't see a reason to necessarily restrict that. But I do see your point. I just wanted to be sure. Thank you. It's a good question, still. And that was Viek. Fantastic. That is interesting. Also, you just barely survived that, too. Did it do true damage? Or unique damage? Yeah, it did. That's a weirdly specific number. But nice. The greed is real. Living Dead? Yeah, of course. And here comes the best part. Dun 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 dun. When you invuln at the end of the fight. I will say, Patrick, what you can do is you can finish your Astral Fire states with Flare. It's an extremely small damage loss, but you can finish it with Flare. And because it's such an extremely small damage loss, it is actually contextually only a damage loss. It's a gain under other circumstances. So you could do that, but yeah, you straight up just don't get to have Fire Starter until you get Paradox. And yeah, if you're about to end something by a 1, if the damage doesn't matter. Axis, I'll never forgive that dungeon for making me do 37 runs for 1 casting top drop. What do you need it for? Was it for a glam? Oh boy. Oh, this was when Yannick was working on the white mage Palace of the Dead clear. The site. Damage and defense up. Get a potion. Time for the big pull. That is scary at floor 171. The power of kiting. The three bros are coming at you. No, wait, one of them is going the other way. Did you screw... What? What? How? Huh? What? Huh? What? What? Oh, they were just out of range. That's still weird. It felt like they were just as far away as... Is that a bomb? So... Just so that I'm understanding this right. You pulled all that. You pulled all that. And then found a mine. What would you have done if you didn't find a mine? Is that possible? And it just wasn't a mine. Philippe says people do high-level stuff on a controller. Yes. Controller's perfectly viable for all content. Oh, hey, Sin. Hope you're doing well. Multiple mines. Oh. And yeah, also that. It's probably not very smart to not have a racing running for a trick like that. The excess, if you quit out of the game on a wipe before leaving the dungeon and wait for 24 hours, is it true that you do not lose the palace run? I would guess that the way that that works is... If you manage... I don't think it works if you exit out of the game, but maybe if you manage to make it so that you get disconnected, or maybe if you end task on the game, like you make it so that the game quote-unquote crashes, then there's a chance that the game server will recognize that you're not in the duty before it fails you. Which would possibly give the same result as how if you get disconnected, like actually get disconnected or crash the game in the middle of a run, sometimes if you wait 24 hours or so, then the game will go, oh, I guess we lost that run, and then just forget it, and then like you'll have a chance to go again. But I believe it's a little wonky with that. Sometimes it's 24 hours, sometimes it just doesn't work. And yeah, same, Philippe. I prefer to play with an MMO mouse as well, but in my defense, I've played with an MMO mouse for like 13 years. And yeah, also that, not only are there people that play on a controller, just in general, Milo, who played Samurai in the previous raid tier and is playing Warrior this tier, in my raid team, plays on controller, and also Viek plays on controller. Hey, Rillian, hope you're doing well. Up next, we have Viek soloing Diamond Weapon Extreme with Dark Knight. Hey, Vivi, hope you're doing well. The thing is, Sun, that it depends on what you're used to, probably. Also, hey Bokaj, hope you're doing well. And hey Cat, hope you're doing well as well. It ultimately comes down to what you're used to. Those laser beams are supposed to hit 2 players. So I guess they don't hit nearly as hard. Simply because, well, it's supposed to be split between 2 and they just don't. I think? Hey Gyarados. Yeah, I would say that there are certain things where specific control schemes may have a specific advantage over another. But most of the time, what really matters is if you can play to the strengths and weaknesses of the control scheme you have chosen. And the particular thing I think a lot of people say is the biggest weakness of controller is targeting party members and sometimes targeting something specific, because with mouse and keyboard you can just, you know, just go dink and click the exact thing you need to target, or go over to the party list and dink, or you have buttons hotkeyed specifically to target someone in particular. Whereas on controller you will usually like flip through players, so you have to like quickly through the list. It matters a lot how you've ordered your party list. And things like that. I've heard people complain that it's a little hard to target the correct thing in PvP, for instance. Admittedly, that's also hard on a mouse and keyboard. Is there a way to make focus target cast bar bigger? That's a good question. Only if you can split it from the focus target. Jose Sean, hope you're doing well. Axis controller's only real quote-unquote objective benefit is how much easier spinning mobs to stop autos is. That's a rather specific one, but yeah, the fact that on mouse and keyboard the only way you can absolutely for certain spin a mob perfectly is if you're like basically by running forward and spinning with your mouse. And like, I mean, at some point you'll run out of desk. You know? Say Perrin, hope you're doing well. Can just make the focus target element bigger in the UI, and then the cast bar will be bigger as well. Yeah, that's true, Perrin. I think the reason I said you'd have to split them is because I imagine the question was, I don't want the focus target health bar to be enormous. You know, this is a nice mechanic when you're alone. Just buy a bigger desk. Yeah, exactly, Riley. Just skill issue. Just have a bigger desk. Just have a bigger desk. Fantastic, Ridley. Chips and salsa and walk and talk stream. DX says, this took a few runs to get it without echo, which is what I aimed for. People already did it solo with tons of echo. Oh, okay. Given the length of the run, I'm assuming that the reason why was because of a DPS check, or like a hardened rage, and not necessarily because he kills you. Yeah, it also explains the gem draft at the start. And that's also a good idea, Alejandro. I know a lot of people, the way that they go about MMOs is if they don't have something like an MMO mouse, is that they'll have like 1 to 4, 1 to 5, maybe even 1 to 6 keybound. And then they will have like, they'll just have WASD keybound so that they can, you know, they can strafe and what they need to. Like that's also part of why a lot of the time, you know, people will play on legacy controls so that those 4 directions do exactly what they need to for that. And then they can have Q, E, R, F, V, C, X, and Z bound to things near where their movement buttons are. That's also why some people that don't know that I have an MMO mouse look at my hotbars and go, what? Why does he have dash and plus key bound? Which, by the way, on my keyboard, the dash that is keybound on the 11th button is next to the right shift on my keyboard, and the plus is 2 buttons to the left of backspace, or rather 1 to the right of 0. So it's completely out of order and completely messed up. That's because I don't press those buttons on the keyboard, so it doesn't matter what buttons they are for. All I care, they could have been minus and plus over in the numpad. Oh, that's another good one, Bokaj. Playing not WASD, but IST, so that you have more buttons to your to the left. There are also some, like, this one is rare, but they, like, I remember, and yeah, I know, roll out the bingo cards. Back in World of Warcraft, I met some players that only had W bound for movement. There were even some that didn't have any buttons bound for movement. They just moved by pressing both mouse buttons. No strafe key is wild. Yeah, it is. It's even weirder when you realize that in WoW, turning your back against an enemy means that you can't dodge or parry anything, so you're going to take more damage by just running away. But I feel like a lot of the time those players were playing like pure DPS classes, so it didn't matter, they just had to run forward. Poof says, I don't have strafe bound at all, and at this point I'm afraid to ask why I should. Do you play on legacy controls or standard controls? Yeah, I have auto run bound, and that's it. Poof, do you have 4 directional movement buttons bound? Like, do you have the basic forward, backward, quote-unquote, turn left and turn right, which on Legacy is run left and run right? Do you have those bound? If you have legacy controls and you have the ability to run in all 4 cardinal directions, then you basically have strafe. It's just that in most games, that setup would be considered like you have forward and backward and strafe. It's just that on legacy, strafe is quote-unquote different from run left and right. It just doesn't matter. On standard controls, players would be more likely to rebind Q and E down to A and D so that you can strafe. Some people also do that in WoW. But I like to have all 6. Because it means that I can turn and run exactly as I need to with both hands. Which is sometimes helpful. Like if I need to turn but I also need to target something with my mouse, then I can do both. And that is true, Copper Sulfate. The key is whether you can turn fast enough. That's the key. You can also greet gazes if you spam alternate strafe keys. Oh yeah. That's true. There are various things that you can do. Alejandro, I will show you the difference after this. Is that the Hardened Rage? I guess not. Nice. Optimized enough that you didn't even see a Hardened Rage. Well done, Viek. I feel like I didn't pay too much attention to it, but I feel like there were points where you clipped the GZ and such. Like that's minor things you could optimize if that's the case, but you did it. So well done. Nice. Right, so I play on standard. So forward, backward, A, D, A, D, right? A, D, Q, E, Q, E. Which means that if you're you can demonstrate like this. It's a little harder because like it's not an instant. Maybe if I do it like this. If you just like strafe while doing this, then you can basically cast something without looking. Technically, if you happen to be hit by the gaze, because the very first frame where you actually cast the thing, the game recognizes you as looking at the target. So if that means you're looking at the gaze on the exact wrong frame, you still get hit, even though you didn't look at it. Which is why it's greeting. Jose Fox, hope you're doing well. The main advantage of standard controls, in my opinion, is that it gives you more fine control of where you're looking. It also means, especially if you have turning options separate from like turning with your mouse, like by having A and D bound, I can look somewhere and just hold forward to keep running the way that I'm running, which is sometimes helpful on a boss because it means that I can be like, well, I need to go this way, but I need to see what the boss is doing. Technically, on legacy controls, I could still do that because I could just hold the other button. The key is that if you start turning the camera, then you start turning where you're running, depending on how you set it up, of course. And also just for reference, forward, backward, so W, S, A, D, Q, E, Q, E. You can see I'm looking forward, specifically. It doesn't matter most of the time. There's also another thing that is different between standard and legacy that is a little awkward, is that I can technically keep looking away while casting something on standard very easily by just wiggling my camera like this. That's true, Darth. That is true. That you can technically do that by using auto run. But that's rather specific. I'd rather not use auto run for that in the middle of a fight. Also, this trick I just showed, you can do that on Legacy. The difference is, on Standard, I just hold right click to take full control of the camera. On Legacy, you either have to do it like this. Now I have full control of the camera by holding right click. Kind of. Ugh. Or you hold both buttons, which is out, like run forward, and hold S to run backwards, which nullifies it, which gives me full control of where I'm facing. And now I can do it. But I have to hold 3 buttons to do that instead of 1. How often is this relevant? Not very often. Fox says for Legacy controls, you can rotate the camera without turning away if you hold down left click. When I hold right click on standard controls, this is what happens as I hold forward. When I hold left click on standard, this is what happens. If I switch to Legacy, this is what happens with right click. This is left click. See a problem? However, if I press auto run instead and left click, right click, right click, left click. But that's auto run. Also during auto run, this is A and this is D. It's like you can do these things. Copper Sulfate says standard also completely changes the direction you run while attacking a boss. That can be a problem. Which is also what happens if I do, for instance, this. But that's something you play around. I've demonstrated this. One way you can play around it is, like, if I just wiggle while running, then you don't see it. Another way you can do it is if you jump while you do the action, then it doesn't matter because you can fix it in the air. So you do like this. That way you don't have to wiggle. You just have to do a quick wiggle while you continue your momentum. And jumping at things is sometimes good anyway. Yannick has demonstrated that jumping with Pomanders is effective and things like that. Jose Zip Zap, hope you're doing well. Copper Sulfate says, I remember before swapping to Legacy in P10S. Oh, yeah, that's a particularly bad one. While crossing the bridge and attacking the boss, it would often auto-phase me towards the boss, and I'd run just off the bridge into the goop. Yes. I did that on P10 normal as well sometimes. But, that's exactly where I learned these tricks, like, you know, finding a way to continue my momentum without getting it screwed up. But part of the reason is that, and this circles back to what I was talking about before, what you're used to. Like, before I tried Final Fantasy XIV, I played WoW for like 15 years, and in WoW, it's not called standard controls, it's called controls. That's just how the game works. Their solution to you walk slower when you backpedal is, so don't keybind back. In Final Fantasy XIV, we go, well, with Legacy controls, you can just hold S and you'll turn and run. But in WoW, you just, like, if you don't want that, you just don't use it. Ever. But there are cases where backpedaling is good, because it allows you to control your movement in a different way that you don't have access to normally. And that's also the case in Final Fantasy XIV. You have 3 different speeds to move. You have this speed, and this speed. So if you need to fine-tune, it can be helpful sometimes. How's it, Ellie? Hope you're doing well. Alejandro says, if you have to immediately run backwards, what do you do? Do this, or just this? You might be saying, well, now you can't look at the boss. Okay, if I really need to run backwards and I also need to look at the boss, I could do this. Or I could do this. Or I could do this. Or I could just, you know, angle a little bit depending on what I need. This has never been a problem before. Hey Jacob, hope you're doing well. But yeah, you can also see this if you see some of the dungeon pulls in when I play tank in mentor roulette videos. You'll see that I basically do this. Like, we don't have any enemies here, but I basically do this for each target. Like, whoop. To, like, and also wiggle to make sure that I don't turn if they're behind me and things like that. Like, there's a lot of things you can do. Yeah, exactly, Alejandro. You can basically look away quite easy. Like, you can also do that with Legacy. Just to be clear, you can do that with Legacy. It's just, it's a lot more complicated to do it on Legacy. And, like, most of the time, it doesn't matter that you can do this. Has anyone had the guts to test if slowly walking backwards wakes the sleeping dragons in Eureka? My guess is that it does. Because if it didn't, I'm sure it would be common knowledge. By now. Considering how much jank Eureka players have figured out over the years and tricks and stuff, they would have figured it out if that was a thing. How would I do what with Legacy? Yeah, that's the thing, Alejandro. Your only ways is if you're actively casting something on Legacy and you want to turn around like that. If you're already casting something, is the only way you can do it is by doing this, right-click, turn. Or, if you know you're going to be casting something where you need to turn, then you hold both mouse buttons to, you know, do this, and also backwards, which causes you to stand still. And then you can just turn. But it's such a specific trick. Also remember that if you're too far away, most attacks require that you're actually looking at your target to hit them. So it becomes rather specific. I think I demonstrated in that UI and controls video that Arda linked earlier. I'm pretty sure I demonstrated that you can, like, if you're standing like this close to an enemy, you can cast something that requires that you're looking at it without looking at it. And you will still satisfy not looking at it at the same time. So you're basically in this like superposition where you're both looking at them and then not. How does invert camera work on standard? I have no idea. Or do you mean this? This is S, by the way. This is walking backwards. And this is forward. I just never use it. And also, just to be clear, walking is slower than backpedaling. I think? I'm like 99% certain that it's slower. This is weird. I just made a weird, wacky discovery. If I press Alt to run from standing, I will of course run. If I press Alt to run from running, I'll of course continue running. If I press Alt to run while backpedaling, I walk. Huh. Well, that's an interesting discovery. Turns out that backpedaling is equal to walking. I was certain all these years. Well. Well then. Yeah, myth busting on stream, that's true. Apparently, Zip-Zap, as I was just testing here, turning on walk doesn't do anything while you're backpedaling. And by seeing that Ilana was just as fast as me walking next to me, it means that it's the same speed. Why Azura Stargaze, Riley? To do Kugane Tower backwards? Is that even possible? I think there are some jumps where you need to go fast. Right, we have one last clip. But I should probably preempt this with... that is a Viek's clip of clearing EX4. The new extreme. So if you don't want to see that, no, you might want to look away for a bit. Depending on how scared you are of those spoilers, you might also, you know, it takes about 10 minutes. Fun fight if only either party finder wasn't a war zone right now. I feel like Copper Soul Fate that the... Whoops. I feel like Party Finder is a war zone on that. Yannick says, just confirmed backpedaling does not aggro sound mobs. Oh! So backpedaling is literally the same as walking. Good to know. Oh wow, just immediate pull timer. By the way, no mage comp. And there's a machinist. 20 minutes in according to the clock. Oh yeah, that's true. It was just, it was after a wipe. That's fair. For some reason my brain thought it was like right as they got in. That's probably a good idea, folks. Probably a good idea. Not just double fizz range, there's a machinist in particular. You know, it is... I do want to mention, not really getting into any spoilers on that, but it seems like every time a fight is even remotely problematic, it seems like Party Finder goes completely haywire. Right now it sounds like M6S is running through that exact same problem. Right? Like, maybe the revelation is that Party Finder is just whack. Also on M5S, oh boy. Oh, let me clarify, Leah. What I mean is more that it seems like Party Finder's having trouble with the fight. Doesn't even matter whether they can agree on the mechanics or not. It seems like they can't agree on getting it done. But fair enough. Party Finder has trouble with every fight? Yes. Someone made a sheet explaining the 5 different raid plans that are circulating on ETH right now. There is a raid plan for the raid plans. Is that right? EX2 in Party Finder was really comfy. Well, EX2... EX2 was such a quote-unquote simple mechanic that you need... or simple fight, that there was like 2 things that you needed to coordinate. So it doesn't surprise me that that was easy. Three things total you have to coordinate in this. In this fight, Bokash? Like this one specifically? I mean, technically, I'm not sure which ones you're counting, but technically you have to coordinate each Escalon's fall. So that's 3 already. This you also need to coordinate, technically. I feel like you're oversimplifying the things that are not that simple, Bokash, just to prove a point. And I don't agree. Like, flat out, nope. You're coordinating that. Right there, you're coordinating that. That's coordination. You have to agree on that. You have to agree on, like, what's coming up. You have to look at that. You have to look at this. And have to coordinate doing that. You need to have a specific position, and you have to coordinate that. This is EF2. You said there was no coordination. You don't need coordination. You do. There might be a strategy that requires less, but you have to do something. I don't think you need... the specific position you need, Bokaj, is that if you don't know where to go, then it becomes a cluster of chaos of finding a spot for you. Technically, you don't need to stand somewhere specific, but you need to have your lane because it's a cone. So you have to coordinate something. Hey, Sergeant Blaine. Hope you're doing well. I feel like it's been a while. Also, that split there, if you don't agree on who runs left or right, you wipe. That's something you have to decide and coordinate. I think I'm disregarding things when accepted singular solution as coordinated. Let's just say, Bokaj, that in EX2 there are a lot of things where even if there is one best solution, the reason why there's very little coordination is because you have 99 different ways to do it, and it doesn't matter which one you do. There's also the part that this fight is a lot harder because of the simple fact that one person goofing it up can lead to a wipe. Marcus says, I keep hearing no quarter. Is there a mechanic where a quarter of the arena gets attacked? It's a term. It has nothing to do with the particular fight. Cantor's accepted singular solution is the opposite of Party Finder. Correct. That was actually the original problem, right? That was the original problem we were just addressing, right? Oh, double kill. Sergeant Blaine says this fight is a lot easier to re-clear than EX3 though. At least a lot more people seem to fail ice bridges than people fail roses here. That makes sense. I feel like it's also that ice bridges give you very little time to think about a lot of things, and it immediately punishes you for making a single little mistake in that moment. And it's very late in the fight. Like, it's not exactly that, but the way that this fight is so centered on the blooms means that when they show you Bloom 6, it's not complete chaos. Oh, that's an EU strategy, isn't it? It's not completely new when you see it. When, like, it would be comparable to if every time EX3... Yeah, that was a Tanglebee. If every time the boss swapped to a different stage, it was just ice bridges with some sort of variety. And then ice bridges with some sort of variety. And then ice bridges with some sort of variety. Copper Sulfate says, you always Tanglebee Bloom 6. You do. It turns out that, that everyone that does the fight has decided that that's how you do it. But you don't have to. It's just both Party Finder, like all Party Finder strats have decided to Tanglebee it. But the EU version specifically is this pattern here. Did you know Bloom 5 skip is possible already? That is crazy. But I heard that the pumpers could already skip Bloom 6 last week. Yeah, this is the EU pattern, I've been told. Which is pretty funny. Like, I'm just saying you always Tanglebee this one, no reason to figure it out, is the same as saying no one does absolute authority correctly. because Party Finder discovered that you can just defensive it and deal with it. If you check our EX3 blind prog, and even our reclears, not once did we meme it up and just tank it. We found a way to do it correctly. Quote unquote correctly. Because we didn't want to meme it up. And we knew from people saying, oh, did you know that people do it like this? Because that's how it is if you do a blind prog on stream. Sometimes people will be like, did you know that? And it's like, no, this is a blind run. They're like, oh, oops. Too late, right? Too little too late. But we knew that it was possible to ignore that mechanic. And we found a way to do it without doing that, because we would like to keep our defensive cooldowns. Admittedly, Bloom 6 is so insanely late in this fight that your options are use melee LB. When could you use that? How soon could you use that, actually? You could use it here. And then, like, if it means you can skip Bloom 6, right? Then we're like back in M4S optimization strats. But if it doesn't mean you can skip Bloom 6, then why? Right? Why bother? Might as well just tank LB, it's easier. I also agree with that, folks, that some of the mechanics are really, really, really hard to see. Because of the overlap of the purple and the kind of soft red makes it really hard to see. But good job, Yek. Well done. Also, hey, Dawntrail. Hope you're doing well. It's kind of strange to do two different EF strats in one fight. You'd think that EF2 would just be done the same way as EF1 and EF3. Well, there is the... People call it the brain dead EF2 strat, I believe. Which I believe the way you do it is that... the brain dead EF2 strat is harder. Yeah, I looked at it and also thought that. What other strats are there? Basically, Bokaj, people realized that the donuts are small enough that if you just have people run to Narnia with them, you can just have people in their correct spots. So, like, if the DPS are getting targeted with the donuts, then they run off to Narnia while the three that get targeted run to Narnia, and then everyone else stacks in the middle with both stack markers, by the way. And then you just run to your spots after that. Like, you have enough time to get into your EF1 spots after the donuts disappear. Or something to that effect. Which mainly DPS is going to agree with that? That is a good question! Oh, true. You can also sprint through them. That's the thing I forgot. So you put the donuts in Narnia and then you sprint through the donut, right? But that still means you could miss a G-City in melee range. Yeah, I prefer to do it where we just have, like, the two stacks. But we already practiced that, so that might be why. colorblind people are at an advantage in EX4? Really? Oh. They're used to it being hard to see. Is that what you mean? That is an interesting suggestion, at least. Ah, it's really hard to see things. You're used to it. Question mark. And yeah, also that, by the way, Copper Sulfate. It's funny how people throw around the term brain dead for everything. It's perfectly in character for the internet, because it perfectly, extremely over-exaggerates something. Like, it's perfect. Because it's weird to me that Brain Dead Bridges was the one where you had to be alert and choose your direction every pull. Funny, right? Vivi says, what would you say is a brain dead strat that is actually brain dead? That is a good question. Scuba Murph says Materia does the same positions for all the Escalons for consistency. Support north and DPS south. Oh! Does that mean that... Do you do EF2, like, properly stacked up in the donut? But because you have adjusted EF1 and EF3 to that, it means that EF1 and EF3 are consistent because the one, that like the quote-unquote limiting factor of EF2 is the one the others adhere to? VX says, do ice bridges still exist? I'd guess they can be skipped by now. They might be. And if they can't yet consistently, then give it a little bit more time. Arx says the first brain dead strat was brain dead in PE1S, where the tanks just took a damage down. Bit says maybe Mario Kart would be considered actually brain dead. I don't think so, because it still relies on at least one person to think. But it is funny how people really want to sell their strategy as the easy one by calling their strategy brain dead. Like, somehow a strategy being called brain dead is some sort of quote-unquote mark of quality, that it is a good one, while anything else pretty much being brain dead is not a mark of quality. In fact, as some of you will remember, especially if you watched along for my job changes stream like last week, was that a lot of people just think that Black Mage is brain dead now. And the thing that I think is funny about that, to not spend too much time on it, is that it was the Black Mage mains saying that it was easier than Summoner now. Where I'm pretty sure what is actually being observed is that relative to what Black Mage was, and people maining Black Mage was probably easier for them than Summoner. It's the same as how I noticed near the end of Endwalker, because I sent out, like, I made a series of videos on the subject of what's the hardest job in every role, what's the hardest job, and it's pretty consistent, or it was pretty consistent in Endwalker, that Black Mage mains would either vote for their own job, or they would vote for Red Mage as hardest mage, where the logic was usually that they didn't actually know how to play Red Mage optimally, so by that token, it was harder. They knew exactly how to play Black Mage, so for them it wasn't the hardest. But they would, some of them would vote for Black Mage because they would step aside from themselves and go, well, if I didn't know what I know, then Black Mage would probably be harder to pick up. And Red Mage mains would be more likely to vote Black Mage is hardest. In the same way that now, Black Mage mains who already know how to do all the tricks, now that the tricks are easier to do, it's basically like the Naruto Rock Lee moment of just dropping the weights, and they already had the skill, so now it's just mega easy by comparison. But that doesn't mean that Black Mage is easier than Summoner. In my opinion, it's not. I feel like I have to think more on Black Mage. But again, just to address what Copper Sulfate said, it always circles back to exaggeration. It's always exaggeration. Like every time, if you just run it through a filter of, I think they're exaggerating, then you'll understand why people say things like that. Bronton, people are saying that Black Mage is easier than Summoner. But yeah, exactly. Anything that we these days stamp as brain dead is probably not brain dead. It's not that easy. But it's very nice to say it is. It's very nice to say it is. But that's also the kind of exaggeration we see where, as I've said before, either things on the internet are peak or dead. Makes it really hard to discuss nuance, doesn't it? When everything is either the best since sliced bread or it's dead. Exactly, Leah. It's basically like... It's like putting a flooring or ceiling modifier on something that shouldn't have it. So like you could argue that a brain dead strat, what it actually is something that requires half the brain power of the harder strat, but the way that it's sold is that it requires 0%. Because it's easier to say that. It's easier to exaggerate that. Parents says lowering the movement requirement, I think, is the only thing that brain dead strats do. Probably. But is that the only part of the strategy that requires brain? Good luck, Blaine! Like, I'm just saying... hypothetically... And I'm possibly exaggerating a bit to prove a point. Okay? Just prefacing with that. For a strategy to truly be brain dead, it would have to be the easiest, simplest possible solution to the strategy. Or to the mechanic. Right? Like, technically, labeling something as brain dead would suggest that there is no simpler way to do it. Right? Yeah, easy and zero on G involved. And I feel like people are very quick to label something as brain dead because it's easier to sell it as easier than what you have been doing so far by calling it brain dead. But if we call it brain dead and then someone else pulls out a strategy that is even simpler, what do you call that? Brain Dead 2 Electric Boogaloo. I mean, that's a good idea. That might actually work. But yeah, the problem is that it makes it really difficult to communicate because we decide to just have one word. Like that's also like this has come up before, not in relation to mechanics, but sometimes people go, well, I don't know any of the names for any of my buttons. I just press the button. Like for instance, if you start discussing samurai actions and start going, well, and then you use Midara Setsugeka, and then you go Hakase, Yukikase, then people will be like, I don't know what those are. And it's like, well, it's the short combo filler. Oh. It's the two-step sticker. It's the speed sticker. It's the damage sticker. Like, but if you don't know the names of things, then it can be difficult to communicate. But if we call everything burger, then how do you tell the difference between when the burger is a circle AoE and when the burger is a donut? If you call all of them burger, like it's if you call everything in AoE, then you don't know what it means when I say an AoE is coming. That's why we have different terms, and that's why it might be bad to call every strategy that is simpler than the previous one brain dead. Right? This is why we call things Chariot and Dynamo. I'm just saying, Leah, the more I've talked about those terms, the more new players have said, the only reason they have ever heard those terms is most of them have heard them in the context of a veteran saying that that's what they call them. Like a history lesson. Or it's because the first time they did a hard mechanic, like where that mattered, was something like Ukop, or they did coils. Which means that it's more likely these days that people will use different terms. It's donuts and circles. I have started to consider calling them cookies and donuts, but so far I haven't decided to stick to it. A good one I also heard from the World First race the other day was a. Let me actually run this by you real quick. What do you think a starburst AoE is? What do you think a starburst AoE is? You can refer to a specific boss as an example for it if you don't know how to explain it. Lines from the center. Yeah, exactly. It's the one where they shoot out in 8 directions. That's a starburst AoE. Yeah, exactly. The vine from Titania. Like I heard that and I was like, that's genius. Because like it doesn't actually explain what it is that well, but everyone knows. Oh, starburst. And you know what starburst also is? Candy. It's also in Mist Dragon. Yes, it's also in the Mist Dragon in the burn. And yeah, the reason why I suggested cookies and donuts is because it would be really, really funny to just have all the mechanic references on a boss fight be food related. Yeah, and the wind thing in the Iukatumu. I was like, Mouse, hope you're doing well. Protein, yeah. You just say protein instead of protein. Like, why do you call it that? Well, it's close enough. What do you call the AoEs that start mid and then slowly go out? I usually call them expanding donut AoEs. Which is technically not entirely correct, because a lot of the time the center one is a circle. Quakes is a good one for that as well. Waves is a good one. Rings out, rings in. Agent Monica says, is that why you called that one mechanic in Golbez sandwiches and bagels? Yes. And that one was complex. So those that wasn't there for the Golbez farm, sandwich means, if you've ever fought Golbez Extreme, you know he does the pose. He does the JoJo pose with the sword. And then either the small pulse or the big pulse. Sandwiches is small pulse because it's a stack of circles. So it would be a circular sandwich, but it's a stack of circles, right? So it's a circle AoE into stacks. Bagels is it's a donut with spread, which would be a bagel. Yeah. And the reason why I don't just go and call everything food stuff is because it has to be actually a good call. Like, it has to be a good call out. If the food call out is longer than a not food call out, then you wouldn't use it. And then it's stupid. Which is why, for instance, I wouldn't call a circle AoE a donut hole, as I think Darth suggested, because it's longer than calling it a circle or a cookie. Mouse says, I've learned something today. 14 Raider slang makes me hungry. Well, I will admit, Mouse, that this is me being weird. Parents, as if folks are calling out meteors, I'm either doing Zodiac EX or I'm taking a tower. That's as I was being a jerk and using words that would make the call harder. How about a scone? Oh, that could also work. I think the important part with whatever terms you would use is, of course, be consistent. But if it's two terms where they are distinctly different, it's pretty important that the terms are very distinctly different. Like, for instance, the fact that a cookie and a donut, or a circle and a donut, start differently in the word is important, because someone might react when you say the first half of the word. You say don't do, and then they start going for the donut. So it shouldn't be two terms that both start with D or C or whatever. We actually ran into problems with that on Uberproc, because beta and delta sounds very similar. And it also didn't help that sometimes, due to voice activation, what you would actually hear sounded like the second half of the D or B sound, so they sound the same. Why not use Bravo for beta? That is also what we ended up doing, folks. That's the solution. That's what we came up with. Hot wings and tail becomes hot dog and hot bun. We were actually talking about something like Pop-Tart for hot tail, because it's long. Hot wings is basically food. Yeah, that's true, Downward. That's actually a good point. Hot wings doesn't need anything. Perfect. It's the ultimate mechanical food reference, because not only is it technically a reference to an old mechanic from Nidhogg Extreme, but it's also food. Just twisters for things like feather? That's a good idea. Bruntum is eating a Pop-Tart right now. I'm jealous. Pop-Tarts are awesome. Why are you all dead? I called it out. I'm pretty sure that Pop-Tarts are basically the same thing as Danish Hindbærsnitter. But that doesn't translate well, because that means raspberry slice. And it might not have raspberry in it. So, you know. That is a really good point, Leah. That's actually a really good thing about raid leading in general. I've talked about raid leading advice here and there before. A big, important detail about callouts, whether you're the raid leader or not, doesn't actually matter, but like advice to your team in callouts, which is most of the time done by the raid leader, but not necessarily, is one, call out things that help the team, but it's exactly the I just called it out, I can't dodge for them, is pretty good. It's like, that's actually how you figure out some of the callouts you need to do in a fight. Like, if you're looking at the fight as the raid leader and being like, well, where can I help, is when your team is goofing up mechanics consistently and you're sitting there thinking to yourself, I can't do it for you. What you can do is tell them what to do. You can see that sometimes if you like watch our Savage prog from the first raid tier, is that, well, sometimes it would call out mechanics where it wasn't really necessary. Like, for instance, you'll see in our farm runs that over time I stopped calling out which side Black Cat cleaved first, the first time, because I was told by the raid team that they had no idea whether I meant my left or their left. So it didn't do anything, right? Like, it didn't help me and it didn't help them. So I just stopped calling it out. Other examples is whenever we went into one of the beats on M2S, I would call out whether it was donut or circle first. Because we had a lot of cases where people got hit by that. I don't know if we needed it anymore, but I called it out. Darth, I mean the first time the half rooms come. The first time is before the first knock-up things. The first time, the reason it matters is because you make 2 clones and then you have to go next to one of them. But yeah, the second time that mechanic comes up in the 2 clones situation, where like she does the quad cross as well, there I say out or in is safe. Gandalfing that fight? What does that mean? Brontom says, I've learned that off-tank should do callouts and not main tank. Oh, just to be clear, Brontom, the way that... I have no memory of this place. Fair enough. The way that it worked, Brontom, is that I was calling out... I believe I was calling out which side Black Cat was cleaving first from the perspective of the party, which is equivalent to calling out which side is safe first for me. But on an off-stream run, I randomly mentioned just, I don't know if this actually helps, and like 3 people said, nah, I'm not actually focused on what you're saying there. I don't know if it's for me or for you. Like, whose left is it? And then I just didn't call it out anymore. And it didn't change anything, because it turned out no one needed that call out. But it does make sense that, like I'm just saying, from Brontom's point of view, Leah, it does make sense if you have a mechanic where, like for instance, Black Cat cleaves left or right first. If you hear the main tank call it, who you know has the reverse perspective of you, you might get confused by that call out rather than helped, because you're like, his left or mine? But if you hear the off tank call it, it's presumably yours, because it's not the main tank's. The off tank is next to you. Sure, if you just know that the main tank always calls out for your POV, then like you'll figure it out eventually. But admittedly, it removes some confusion when there are cases where the main tank and the rest of the party's perspective is different. If you just make sure that it is someone who has the same perspective as the rest of the raid who does the callouts. Which, speaking of which, like, I started doing less callouts when I started playing Black Mage, but one part of it is that I'm too focused on doing my rotation to think about that. But another thing is also that a lot of the time, my point of view is somewhere, like, off to the side. Whereas the off tank and the main tank have really good positions to see what's going on. Of course, this can confuse the main tank till they get used to it. That's also true, but eventually, main tanks also realize that no one's making callouts specifically for them. Oh yeah, that could also help you, just saying her left first. Or rather, she strikes at her left first, and then hopefully that's good enough, because that's really long. Maybe I'll do callouts in the new maybe I'll do some callouts in the new Black Mage, but it just turned out that it was a lot easier to let someone else do it when I was playing Black Mage. I was busy doing Swift casted Blizzard 3s. It's important. But yeah, ultimately, and that's also what Leah said, what really matters is that the person making the call out is consistent. And that, like, that's what really matters. That's also why I called out that thing until I knew for certain that no one cared. Then I stopped doing it. Only once we knew that it wasn't needed. But I will continue to do the callouts. If I start doing a callout, I'll keep doing the callout forever. Because if I suddenly stop doing it, or I'm inconsistent about doing it, then the callout is useless. Like, some of you may have watched when we did the EX4 prog last week, and I can't remember if it was Ham or Melo, but one of them called out whether we swap on whether it was double swap or single swap on Escalon's Fall. And then there was a poll where they didn't. And we somehow lived, mostly, but it turned out, it was Melo, thank you, Shaq. It turned out that most of us had then just decided, okay, fantastic, I don't need to look. There's a call out. I'll just listen. And that included me. So when it wasn't called out, I was like, well, I guess I'll just look at what everyone else is doing. I'll just follow everyone else. And that wasn't the only mechanic where I did that. I just went, well, I'll just follow that guy. I think it's a Bloom 2, the one where you have to where there's an in out or out in, follow alongside cleaves. I usually just follow the raid But that's it. That is the reason why it's important that you're consistent, because there's a very high probability that if your callout is good, then, like if you're raiding a static, your static is going to assume that you keep doing it. And if you don't, then either your callout is not helpful or it becomes superfluous. Everyone already knew what the solution was, because they ended up being, like, they ended up figuring out on their own. They don't know if you're gonna call it out, so they have to look every time. If you plan to, like, bring your skills into Party Finder, it's probably a good idea to know how to do it on your own. But if you're in a static and you only plan to play with your static, then if the raid leader's calling it, then that's fine, right? VXs get everyone to rely on your callouts and stop doing them. Profit? I don't think you'll profit. But that, like, an example of that, of a not just consistent but comfortable doing it, is exactly like, for instance, Rotten Heart. And is it Final Fuse Down? The one with all the fuses. In both cases, well, less so with Rotten Heart, but especially with the fuses on M3S, I wouldn't... Yeah, Fuse Field. I wouldn't have been able to make those callouts while playing a more complicated job. I'm pretty sure most of the time during that mechanic, I'm either just doing 1, 2, 3s or just mashing Fell Cleave. Just Fell Cleave, Fell Cleave, Fell Cleave, Fell Cleave. It might have worked if the majority of the sequence happened to come up in like I'm just casting 6 Fire Force, and then Flare Star Despair, Mana Font, more Fire Force. Like that's like 30 plus seconds of basically Fell Cleave, ranged Fell Cleave with explosions. I could probably figure out coordinating as Black Mage if that was when it happened to come up. Now the question is whether it would do that. The revelation Fire 4 is ranged Fell Cleave. It's close, isn't it? And not only is it ranged Fell Cleave, you get more of them than a warrior would. This is diverging into warrior. Maybe that's the reason why I suddenly feel compelled to play Black Mage after playing warrior for raid tier. Oh, this also has Fell Cleave. Fantastic, it has more Fell Cleave. Amazing. Superb. Warrior also has Fell Cleave. Oh, I also have Fell Cleave. I also have Fell Cleave. Or is this Fell Cleave and this is Fellest Cleave? But that would mean Fire 1 is Fire Fell Cleave and Fire 4 is Fire Fell Cleave. Is it? I feel like Fire 1 doesn't quite get the Fell Cleave effect. Because it's a builder. Like, it feels more like doing 1, 2, 3s when you're using Fire 1. Blood Wedding to Black Mage, Green Caster DPS. They change Mana Ward into a Mana Wedding. Fella Cleave? For those fellas you just can't deal with anymore. Wow. Mana Wetting. Your builders B3, B4 Para, F3P. That's true, yeah, but at level 50, You basically only have builders. Technically, F3 is your spender before you get Fire 4. Like, it's like if Warriors 1-2-3 combo, instead of generating Beast Gauge, it just had a chance to give you 50, just like that. That's Firestarter before you get Fire 4. Which means that there is a time where Fire 3 is Fell Cleave. High Fire 2 is a really sad Decimate then. I don't know. I feel like Fire 2 is just sad. Fire 3 is Fell Cleave. Marcus, before you get Fire 4, Firestarter is a resource you spend immediately for damage gain. Just like Beast Gauge. Right? Yeah, Fell Cleave is complicated to optimize before you get inner release. High Fire 2 is decimated, decimate. That would be a funny meme. Black Mage is ranged warrior. Isn't Decimate already sad? Is it sad? Is Decimate sad? Why would Decimate be sad? Is Decimate sad? Feels weak? You know what feels weak, Leah? Chaotic Cyclone after getting a 33% nerf. That feels weak. It used to be 300. It's a miracle they didn't drop it below Decimate. That would have been weird. Maybe that's why they stopped at 200. They just went, kadoosh. They brought exactly this hammer and just smacked Chaotic Cyclone. Just. Is Warrior the only job that doesn't get anything from upgraded to its job at level 30? They get... I believe it's because they used to get Defiance at that level, Dawntrail. Sorry. I'm not sure about Paladin. I feel like they just... Like, I don't know if they used to get something at 30. Do they not get their gauge at 30? Warriors get their gauge at 35. What does Monk get? They get Demolish at 30. And Rockbreaker. Demolish and Rock... from the job, they get Rockbreaker. Well, what I meant, Dawntrail, was more that Paladin, I don't know if they got a class action at level 30. White Mage gets their gauge at 52. And they get Presence of Mind. Like, they get a damage button, essentially, as their first job action. Bard gets songs, Scholar gets to exist. they appear from nothing. It's something like that, guys. Like, that was actually the weird thing, is that originally Paladins got Sword Oath first and then Shield Oath. Then eventually they changed it. Like, they flipped them and were like, that's actually stupid, that the tank gets their damage stance first. Pictomancer gets a motif that's a damage loss at 30. Is it that bad? Let me actually check. I did Annoy the Void, I think? No, that was not it. I did Shadow and Claw, which is level 36, and discovered that Pom Muse was 400 potency. Which means that it's actually weaker than Fire and Red in terms of, like, potency per second. Unless you can get to Winged Muse and then get a Mog of the Ages. So like that. Ninja gets ninjutsu at 30 and can use Huma Shuriken. Let's see, Fire and Red is 260. Fire and Red 2 is 120. So wins on 3 targets there. Arrow is 300. Water is 340. So Fire in Red 2 wins on 3 targets, just flat. Without the rest of the combo being present, because it isn't. The combo of Fire and Red as it is averages 300 potency per GCD, which means that let's see, that's 116.7 potency per second baseline. Pom is 400 with a very weak AoE component of like a little bit. Let's see, 120 on AoE. So technically on AoE it beats Fire 2 and Red if you have it beforehand. Like, it doesn't actually beat it. I guess on a high target count, Fire 2 and Red would win. But Pom Muse taking 4 seconds to prep is not good. Then Winged Muse combines with Mog, which means that Winged is actually 900. There it's actually good. But that still means that on average, the living motif is 650 at level 30. But only if you get to use it 2 of them. Then it averages 650. Which is divide by 4. 166.7 potency per second. Which, you know, does beat, I think, 300 divided by 2.5. That would be 120. So it does win if you get 2, but only if you get 2. And your hammer's not dead, it's just it's really complicated to use it well. Also true, Darth, if you prep correctly, you probably won't have the fight last long enough for you to ask yourself whether you need to paint a Pom at that level. I was born at the young age of 30 and it's not getting better. Oof. The thing that makes Hammer a little bit awkward is because apparently it's good for the 2-minute burst. But aside from that, Living Muse and of course Starry Muse are just better. Which means that if you need to draw something while moving, you'd probably draw not Hammer unless you need it for movement. We can probably make an estimate on Hammer by just doing this. It should be decent on AoE. Although it has a huge AoE drop-off. Oh boy, it's straight up Fire and Red, but it's a direct crit. And at this level, you can probably assume that you don't have Like, you don't have all the raid buffs necessarily, and your gear is probably not going to be, like, massively, like, hugely... Like, it'll be specific, right? It'll be rather specific. It's probably going to be great, actually. But, it is 11.5 seconds to do 3 D-crit fire and reds with an AoE component. Is that worth it at level 50? On the one hand, it's complicated and there's an AoE component. On the other hand, if you just take a look at trials, because I know those. Odin has a DPS check. You can prep the hammer before that. That makes hammer good. Ultima weapon has sections where you probably would like to move, so that's probably good. Garuda has moments where she straight up leaves, so it's probably good. Titan has moments where he leaves, so it's probably good. Ifrit has moments where he leaves, so it's probably good. It might actually not be good on Thornmarsh, although the damage is going to be more consistent because you're always going to decrit, I guess. But it's AoE, so that could be awkward. Leviathan leaves. Ramu becomes unattackable. Shiva has moments where she's unattackable, like one. Is a direct crit for 60% more damage. A direct crit with 0 gear helping is 75% more damage. A direct crit starts at 75% more damage. But should you have crit or direct hit, it's more. Which is why I think people estimate with like 90% or something on the hammer. I'm not entirely sure, but it's something like that. The big problem is, again, that you're investing 4 seconds to guarantee critical direct hits and get like a slight damage uptick from direct hit. It says, genuinely at that point I have to ask if they just regret the entire design. I will say, and this is probably very controversial, or potentially could be, depending on how I word it. The fact that drawing the motifs is not always the correct choice makes the motifs more interesting. Because before these changes, it was a given that you were going to use them. Of course you are. It's always a gain to use them. Now, you actually have to think about whether you want to do it. Because it makes them interesting in the wrong way. Yes. I would say that it would probably have been even more interesting if they instead had more options. Like, imagine if you had 6 or 2 to choose from on each of them. Maybe not on the last one because it's a raid buff, but maybe if you had 2 different things, like something other than creature motif and something other than weapon motif. And what you were drawing depended on the situation. That might be more interesting. At least in concept. In practice, we would find out what was most optimal and just do that. I suppose one thing that could have made it a little nicer, because I feel like the design of making hammer something that you paint situationally like this is interesting. The thing that makes that design stumble is that they nerfed living motif too, which means that if you're going to draw something while running, you're drawing living motif first, probably. Which means that hammer is really far down. I don't know how they would fix that, because buffing living doesn't change that. But I will say that I think, in a weird twist, Black Mage became simpler in the way that Pictomancer was a little bit easier to commandeer, you could say. And Pictomancer became more complicated. But the way that they did this is that they made it easier to do the cool thing on Black Mage, and they made it harder or more confusing to do the cool thing on Pictomancer, because now you don't actually know if you want to do that. In a way, it's a little bit like Pictomancer had the no timers Astral Fire, and then they slapped timers on it, and Black Mage lost it in the same swing. So it becomes really complicated. You know, the funny thing there, Bits, is that I've already seen people consider not bringing Pictomancers for Savage stuff. Like, not saying they're justified, but they looked at the nerf and the confusion of hammer and just went, I don't want to deal with that. Even though it's like, that's the Pictomancer's problem, not yours. But genuinely players picking around Pictomancers because they don't want to deal with that nonsense. So like, Pictomancers are already in a point where if they get nerfed more, that might actually be really damaging. Even though they didn't get nerfed that much at the end of the day. Yeah, the best you can do, Bits, is try to ignore the people complaining when it gets a little too much. But I will say, on the one hand, I do think that it is like, it's not bad that Pictomancer has to think about like one of their core mechanics of painting, right? The thing that makes that kinda suck is that the time where you're not doing that, you're essentially doing a 1-2-3 combo, right? Like, that's the thing that makes it feel a little sucky, I think. Does that sound right? Like, if the motifs were like one thing you were doing, but you also had this other thing you were managing, in addition to having fire and red to fill with and that. Like, if you had like a little more to work with, then the fact that motifs become something that you have to really think about and maybe not do wouldn't be as big of a deal. The problem is that they nerfed the interesting funny buttons and then buffed your filler combo. Like, I'm just saying, I remember, if I remember correctly, they buffed Soul Slice from 480 to 520 early in Dawntrail, because they forgot that this buff is so big that that waxing slice was better than Soul Slice on raw potency. That didn't mean you wouldn't use Soul Slice, but you start to reach a point where it's like, isn't Soul Slice supposed to be a good move? Nope, it's just straight up a resource generator with a damage component. I was like, oh, hope you're doing well. Viper's more fun, the 1 to 3 combo's never the same. I will say people have said that it feels like it's the same. Like, it is a 12-step looping rotation. But I also think Viper's fun. Well, Bruntum, isn't Viper just Red Mage? Reaper's Red Mage. And I guess Red Mage is technically Machinist. In a way. Or is Machinist Red Mage? Exactly, Red Mage was first because Machinist got reworked. I thought Reed Mage was... Yeah, Reed Mage is Scholar, that's correct. Viper is Reaper, Reaper is Machinist, and Machinist is Red Mage. So Viper is Red Mage. Wouldn't Reed Mage be Summoner? That's also Reed Mage. Actually, that could be Math Mage, because they, like, use geometric shapes. Alright, Leah, enjoy your evening. Reed Mage is Fisher. Yeah, if they had magic. Does Fisher have something that counts as magic? And now Black Mage is Warrior? Yeah. And Dark Knight is Warrior. And Paladin is Gunbreaker. And Sage is Scholar. So we have Warrior, Gunbreaker, Scholar, White Mage, Astrologian, Red Mage, Summoner, Pictomancer, Monk, Samurai, Dragoon, and Ninja. And Dancer and Bard. I'll say you, Ryan. Hope you're doing well. Cards are exactly Etherflow. Well, I feel like Astrologian is still different enough from Scholar to not be Scholar. Why are we listing jobs? We're making the joke that all jobs are copies of each other. Black Mage is Warrior, because Fellcleave. Machinist is Red Mage, because Machinist builds up a gauge and then they do like 5 attacks in a row. In a slightly faster burst. Reaper is Red Mage, because they build up a gauge and then they, in a burst, they do like 5 attacks at a slightly faster burst. Viper is Red Mage, because they build up a gauge and then they, in like about 5 attacks, they do a slightly faster burst. Viper is also Samurai, because damage and speed buff. Oh, that's a good point. Maybe Dancer's just Ninja. Doesn't Yoshi main Ninja now? I think he said he wanted to main Pictomancer, but he still plays Black Mage on streams. Oh, yeah, and Dark Knight is Warrior, yes. And Paladin is Gunbreaker. The joke being that like a large part of the toolkit, you can basically go, that button is that button is that button is that. Why is Paladin Gunbreaker? Well, check this out, Dawntrail. When you start your burst, hold on, right? You use No Mercy. This is also No Mercy. Then you use Double Down. And you also get one Sonic Break to use at some point. You also double weave blast. You can also weave Blasting Zone and Bow Shock. This would have been Rough Divide, but they lost that. And then you also have the Gnashing Fang combo. And at the end, you use like 3 fillers. Your 3 best fillers. Oh yeah, true. Intravenous Continuation. But yeah, basically, you can almost overlay the Paladin burst with the Gunbreaker 1-minute burst. And it looks eerily similar. I don't think Viper is Paladin. Viper's Red Mage. Wasn't Paladin the same? Paladin was unique before the rework in Endwalker, you could say, Dawntrail. It had a unique rotation that didn't overlap at all with Gunbreaker. Then Paladin was reworked, and incidentally, it looks basically identical. Like, its burst looks eerily similar to the Gunbreaker one. That's the joke. Dark Knight got reworked in Shadowbringers, and its burst suddenly looked eerily similar to the Warrior one. That's also like, that's part of the joke. Let me put it like this. Before Shadowbringers, Delirium was not the same as Inner Release in any capacity. Was the only unique job, quote unquote? I mean, Pictomancer's unique, Summoner's somewhat unique, Bard is somewhat unique, Dancer is somewhat unique, Ninja is somewhat unique, Dragoon is somewhat unique, Monk is somewhat unique, and Samurai is somewhat unique. There's a bunch of them. Black Mage is technically unique. That's true. The stretch of saying Black Mage is Warrior is quite a stretch. But it's really funny. The only thing missing is Fell Cleave is 40 potency higher than Fire 4 in Astral Fire 3. If you listen to the Balance Discord, Black Mage is White Mage, actually. Yeah, that's also true. They say it's White Mage. Because they have Presence of Mind. And they have Dia. And they have Glare. I'm glad to hear that, oh. I'm having fun with Black Mage at all levels. Although some are funnier than others. Pictomancer is the same as Black Mage, isn't it? It's not really comparable. Like, the motifs completely mess it up, so it's not really comparable. But they do have some interesting overlaps. For instance, sometimes you could make the comparison that triple cast is basically Hammer. You know, the funniest part about that, Bakash, is that now that I've started to mess around with Black Mage as it is now, I have looked at, maybe it would be more fun with a slow build, but now speed is actually really good. And I'd rather focus on that, just in case it stays really good. And it's also fun to have high speed. Yeah, anyway, total chaos, am I right? Fantastic. We actually managed to get through all the clips. I ran out of clips. I ran out of clips. And we're not even an hour overtime. Yeah, exactly, Dawntrail. But I do think that this is a good time to wrap up. So, if you enjoyed this particular stream, it helps me a lot if you leave a like on it here on YouTube. That tells the algorithm this was an enjoyable stream. I'd like other people to enjoy it as well. So, thanks so much in advance. And if you'd like to be part of the Discord community server, there's a link in the chat from Aradil right there. There you will find the weekly schedule where you can see what else is coming up in the coming days, as well as you will find the announcement room where you will see links to videos and streams when they put them out. And if you grab the reminder role in the role assignments room, you'll get a notification whenever I post a video or stream, as well as an extra one around 15 minutes before stream starts, so you can catch it right when we go live. I usually update the schedule like Sunday or Monday. And if you'd like to support the channel even more directly, you can become a member of the channel, you can gift memberships, you can use the super chat system, or if you don't like any of that, there's a Ko-Fi link in the description. It all helps support me and the channel directly so that I can focus on doing stuff like this with all of you. So thank you so much for the support. But that'll be all from me for tonight. So good night, good morning, afternoon, or evening, depending on where you are in the world, and I hope to see you all very soon. Bye bye!